Chapter 1, Early Winter Brought a Creeping Chill. Cora Hayes was waiting on the road leading down from Serenity Peak Monastery. She knew today was the day Ethan Sterling's meditation retreat ended. Ethan Sterling, the man known throughout the capital's elite circles as the ascetic of high society. Born into a prestigious family, devastatingly handsome and utterly detached. Countless women threw themselves at him, but he was a man of simple tastes, devoted to his spiritual path. And Cora Hayes was the most reckless of all the moths drawn to his flame. A black Maybach descended from the mountain. Cora rushed out, positioning herself to be hit. The Maybach screeched to a halt, but she was still knocked to the ground. The driver, terrified, looked up and saw it was Cora. His panic instantly faded into weary resignation. He glanced at the rearview mirror to report, "Mr. Sterling, it's Miss Hayes again." In the back seat, Ethan Sterling sat in a stark, black tunic suit, sandalwood prayer beads in hand. He didn't even open his eyes. "Ouch, that hurts." Cora's voice was delicate enough to wring water from, but she quickly realized Ethan couldn't hear her from inside the car. She struggled to her feet, deliberately limping over to knock on the window. The driver rolled it down. "Miss Hayes, what is it this time?" "What do you mean?" "You hit me. I came up here to pray all by myself, and now I can't get down the mountain." "Ethan Sterling, you have to take responsibility for me." Silence. A dead, crushing silence. But even without a response, Cora clung to the window, refusing to let go. After what felt like an eternity, the car door finally swung open. Cora's eyes lit up, and she quickly scrambled inside. Once in, she eagerly sat beside Ethan, cooing, "I knew you were the best to me." Ethan opened his eyes and thumbed one of the sandalwood beads. His cool, refined features were as crisp as the first snow. His gaze swept over Cora. "Abbot Mason told me to accumulate good karma," he said. The meaning was clear. "Don't get any ideas. Helping you is purely an act of charity." Cora didn't mind. She had been chasing Ethan for 5 years. Just getting into his car was a victory. "You were on the mountain for a week this time. I missed you so much. Only your assistant could see you. I couldn't even get close. You're amazing, managing the company so well even during a retreat. Have you gotten even more handsome?" One moment she was a spurned lover, the next a starstruck fan. But no matter how much longing or admiration she expressed, the man beside her remained completely unresponsive. Suddenly, the car hit a pothole and jolted. Cora used the momentum to lean into Ethan's arms. But before she could even touch him, he frowned and pushed her away. Rejecting her was almost a reflex. "Why are you so stingy?" Cora muttered, forced to sit up straight. The car continued down the mountain, stopping in front of the Sterling Group headquarters. Ethan spoke coolly, "I have business to attend to. Get a taxi home." With that, he opened the door and got out. Cora had barely exchanged a few words with him the entire ride. She scrambled out of the car, trying to stop him. "Ethan, I have something to tell you." The moment her foot hit the ground, a sharp pain shot through it. She really had sprained her ankle earlier. Cora's eyes widened as she lost her balance and tumbled toward Ethan again. But Ethan, assuming it was another one of her tricks, coldly stepped aside and watched her fall. Thud in front of the Sterling Group building, employees were constantly coming and going. The commotion drew everyone's attention, their gazes filled with a familiar lack of surprise. Being a young woman, falling so publicly left Cora mortified, her ears burning red. Just then, Ethan's secretary, Penelope Quinn, came down to greet him. "Sir, the chairman of Viridian is waiting for you on the 23rd floor." Ethan gave a slight nod and walked away, leaving Cora on the ground without a second glance. Penelope didn't follow immediately. Instead, she looked down at Cora and smirked. She was also secretly in love with Ethan, but lacked Cora's wealth and audacity. But she certainly enjoyed watching Cora make a fool of herself. "Miss Hayes, I know Mr. Sterling is a man of faith, but a bit eager for a prayer, aren't we?" A wave of snickers rippled through the crowd. The Sterling employees cast mocking glances her way. "She's been chasing Mr. Sterling for 5 years. Talk about relentless." Relentless. I'd say shameless. She's a rich heiress, for goodness sake. Doesn't she have any dignity? Every word reached Cora's ears. She grit her teeth against the pain and forced herself to stand. Penelope snorted in disdain and turned to leave. Cora brushed the dust off her clothes and quietly walked away. Ethan's cold indifference, her rival's taunts, the public's scorn. It wasn't that she didn't know, didn't care, or wasn't hurt. It was just that she had a life or death reason to cling to Ethan Sterling. As Cora walked on, her limp was now painfully real. A familiar, mechanical voice sounded in her ear system alert. 30 days remaining to complete the mission. Host must succeed or face termination. Chapter 2. Cora hadn't been born into this world. She'd been brought here. Though she had the status of the Hayes family heiress, she lived in constant fear. Because she had a mission of infernal difficulty, to win the love of Ethan Sterling. Ethan Sterling, the unattainable prize of the capital's elite, the so-called ascetic of high society. It would be easier to win over a man in a coma. But only by making Ethan fall in love with her could Cora survive. For this, she had used every trick in the book, and over 5 years had unwittingly lost her own heart in the process. But whether her feelings were real or feigned, they couldn't melt that block of ice. With only a month left on the clock, Cora didn't even have time for sorrow. Her heart tightened. She had to win over Ethan Sterling, and soon the next day, just like before, she began to relentlessly pursue him. She even started making him 3 gourmet lunchboxes a day, delivered personally. Not even a full-time housewife could be so diligent. Unfortunately, she never made it past his office door before Penelope Quinn intercepted her. The lunchboxes were always left on the reception desk. Penelope, acting as Ethan's official mouthpiece, would say, "Miss Hayes, Mr. Sterling doesn't eat food from outsiders. Please leave." She always put a special emphasis on the word outsiders. When the lunchbox strategy failed, Cora tried other avenues. Thankfully, her family was wealthy. She spent her days finding new ways to get his attention. She was featured in television broadcasts, on the radio, and in newspapers. She was determined to make him see her declarations of love through a different channel every day. After several days of this, and after a few business partners gave him knowing, gossip-filled looks, the ascetic finally lost his composure. In the CEO's office, Ethan's assistant spoke timidly. "Miss Hayes says that unless you agree to see her, she'll be in the papers every day." Ethan stared at the exaggerated headlines, his eyes dark and cold. That evening, at a coffee shop, Cora finally got her wish. "Cora, what exactly are you trying to do?" Cora gazed at him with profound affection. "I just like you." Ethan's expression was frigid. "I'm not interested in you. You're not interested in anyone else either," Cora thought, pressing on. "Interest is something that can be cultivated." "I don't like you. I never have, and I never will. Stop these disgraceful antics. From now on, for every paper you appear in, I will personally see to it that the publisher goes bankrupt." Ethan had no time for her games. After delivering his warning, he left. Cora was so angry she shouted at his retreating back, "You won't even give me a single chance." But his silhouette never paused, merciless to the very end. The light in Cora's eyes gradually dimmed. "But Ethan, I'm running out of time." Although Ethan disliked her, Cora's years of pursuit weren't entirely fruitless. The rest of the Sterling family, for instance, was quite fond of her. Over the years, she had frequently visited their home to shower them with attention, winning over both Arthur and Alina Sterling. That weekend, Cora went to the Sterling estate again. First, she played tennis with Arthur, then she did flower arrangements with Alina. "Cora, dear, how are things with you and Ethan lately?" Alina asked suddenly, placing a poppy into a vase. Cora's expression immediately fell. "Oh, same as always." But then she brightened with renewed confidence. "Don't you worry, though. I'll get him to accept me." Alina smiled. Cora was the only girl who had managed to stay by her son's side for 5 years. Her family background was a perfect match, and Alina was 100% satisfied. "You silly child. If he won't accept you, I'll accept you for him." The two chatted and laughed as they arranged the flowers, the atmosphere light and easy, until Ethan walked through the door. He saw Cora playing the part of the doting daughter-in-law with his mother, shot her a cold look, and headed straight upstairs. "Ethan, Cora is here to see you. Are you blind?" Alina called out angrily. Only then did Ethan stop. But his voice was just as calm. "I have unfinished work." Using work as an excuse, he disappeared into his study, but he had underestimated Cora. A few moments later, there was a knock on the study door. "Come in." Cora entered carrying a tray of tea. "You always neglect your health when you work," she said softly. "I brewed this myself. It's supposed to help you relax." Chapter 3, she was like a doting wife, pouring tea for him at his side. If only, a second later, she hadn't pretended to be scalded and used the moment to fall gracefully into his lap. Ah, Cora yelped as if electrocuted, landing squarely on Ethan's lap. She threw her arms around his neck, her eyes wide and panicked as she met his gaze, shimmering with tears from the burn. The whole sequence was flawlessly executed. To top it off, she had spritzed on a special perfume before coming upstairs. It was called Siren's Call. Cora smiled to herself. This time, it has to work. But after more than 10 seconds of eye contact, there was no spark of chemistry, no hint of attraction. Ethan's eyes were as placid and unmoved as ever. His lips parted, and he offered her 2 utterly indifferent words. "Get up," Cora froze, trying to salvage the situation. "My hand really hurts," Ethan replied flatly. "The housekeeper has burn cream, telling me is useless." How could anyone be so completely unfeeling? Another seduction attempt failed. Furious and mortified, Cora had no choice but to get up. She went downstairs dejectedly, feeling utterly helpless against the man's coldness. Her plan a failure, Cora decided to leave, but Alina insisted she stay for dinner. She didn't refuse, instead sitting alone on the garden swing, shivering in the cold wind and lost in thought. As if on cue, the tactless system popped up. System alert, 25 days remaining. Host, please complete the mission as soon as possible. Cora's brow furrowed even deeper. The memory of Ethan's frigid expression sent another pang of pain through her heart. Meow. Just then, a black and white cat darted out from a corner. Her eyes softened into a smile. "Pinecone, come here." But the cat, much like its owner, was aloof. It ignored her completely, darting around the garden. This was Ethan's cat. Abbot Mason from Serenity Peak Monastery had said that Ethan's nature was too detached and his emotional ties too weak, suggesting a pet might soften his heart. Ethan always listened to the old abbot, so he had adopted Pinecone. As Cora swung gently, she suddenly heard a splash. Pinecone had tripped over a decorative rock and fallen into the garden pond. A dark shape thrashed in the water, sending ripples across the surface. Cora immediately jumped to her feet. Hearing Pinecone's distressed cries, she dove in without a second thought. It was December, and the pond was as cold as ice. Cats instinctively know how to swim, but Pinecone had never been in water before and was panicking. In her struggle to catch the frantic animal, Cora swallowed several mouthfuls of freezing water. Finally, she managed to climb out, clutching the cat. A crowd had gathered on the bank, and Ethan had come downstairs to see what the commotion was about. Cora was soaked to the bone, her perfect makeup ruined, shivering uncontrollably in the winter air. She handed Pinecone back to him. Ethan looked at her, his voice quiet. "You don't have to do this." Cora froze. Seeing his cold expression, she understood immediately. He probably thought she had only saved the cat to win his favor. Pinecone was indeed important to him, but her actions had been pure instinct. It seemed that no matter what she did, in Ethan's eyes, it was always calculated. Cora lowered her gaze, her pale face looking particularly pitiful. She wiped the water from her cheeks. "I wasn't thinking about that. I was just worried something would happen to Pinecone." At her words, for a rare moment, Ethan actually looked stunned. But Cora was already being led away by a maid to change her clothes. Fearing she would catch a cold from the soaking, Cora decided to leave early. She walked out of the Sterling estate, dejected, only to see a familiar luxury car parked outside, as if waiting for her. Ethan rolled down the window. "Get in." Chapter 4, for a split second, Cora thought she was hallucinating. Ethan was offering her a ride, voluntarily. Seeing her stand there blankly, he repeated himself. "Get in." He had the look of a man about to drive off if she didn't move, so Cora quickly got into the passenger seat. All her earlier disappointment vanished. Cora asked tentatively, "Why are you giving me a ride?" "Someone forced me," Ethan said, not bothering to hide the truth. "And consider it a repayment for saving Pinecone. I'm settling his debt." The someone, of course, was his mother, Alina. But this was a golden opportunity, and it would be a waste not to use it. The Maybach pulled away smoothly. Cora's eyes darted around thoughtfully. Finally, she asked cautiously, "Ethan, my birthday is in 3 days. My family is throwing me a party. Will you come?" Ethan glanced at her. "Cora, don't push your luck." His words were like a bucket of cold water, and she lowered her head. Oh, she knew it wouldn't be that easy. She remained silent for the rest of the drive. From the rearview mirror, Ethan saw her slumped posture and was inexplicably reminded of her emerging from the pond, soaked and shivering. After a long silence, just as they were about to arrive, he finally spoke again. It was a reluctant sigh. "If I finish my work at the company early, I'll go." Cora's eyes widened in surprise and delight. "I'll be waiting for you." Ethan just wanted to clear his debt to her. Seeing her so elated, he felt a sudden pang of regret. But it was too late. Cora got out of the car, her happiness radiating from every pore. With only 3 days until the party, she decided to prepare meticulously. She had to be beautiful, stunning, so captivating that the moment he saw her, he wouldn't be able to look away. Cora planned a special surprise and chose a stunning, backless aqua blue gown, its fabric shimmering with sequins. On the day of her birthday, she waited with breathless anticipation for Ethan's arrival. The Hayes mansion was buzzing with people who had come to celebrate with her, but among the crowd, she couldn't find the one person she most wanted to see. Cora, wrapped in an overcoat, kept glancing at the entrance. As time passed with no sign of him, her heart began to sink. Just when she thought he truly wasn't coming, he finally arrived. Ethan, the moment she saw him, a wave of relief washed over her. Ethan maintained his usual restrained demeanor. "Sorry, the meeting ran late." As long as he came, Cora didn't care how long he made her wait. The room was crowded. Impatient, she mysteriously led him to a secluded spot. He frowned slightly. "What are you doing?" "I have a surprise for you." Cora slowly slipped off her overcoat, revealing the dazzling gown. Then she turned her back to him. A vibrant red lotus was tattooed on her back, startlingly lifelike. Ethan's gaze froze. Cora's eyes shone. "What do you think? Do you like it?" Lotuses are cherished in Buddhism. Since Ethan was a spiritual practitioner, Cora had deliberately gotten a red lotus tattooed on her back. The flower bloomed against her fair skin. She seemed the furthest thing from a spiritual person, yet the lotus suited her perfectly. For the first time, his breathing hitched. Absurd, he turned and stormed away, leaving Cora standing there in stunned silence. But a moment later, she ran after him. They raced from the house onto the street. Cora blocked his path. "Why are you leaving? You promised you'd celebrate my birthday with me." Ethan's breathing was unsteady. He wouldn't even look at her. "I have to go. And you don't ever do something like this again." He was determined to leave, and she was just as determined to make him stay. In their struggle, neither of them noticed a car careening out of control down the street. Just as the car was about to hit them, Cora's heart lurched. Without a second's thought, she threw herself in front of Ethan. "Look out!" Crash! The impact sent her flying 3 meters through the air. Cora, blood streamed from a gash on her head. Pale and weak, she looked at him and managed a faint smile. "As long as you're okay." Then she collapsed into his arms. For the first time, an emotion other than cold detachment flickered in his eyes. He swept her up and raced toward the hospital. The smell of antiseptic in the hospital room was sharp and overwhelming. After what felt like an eternity, Cora finally woke up. Her head was wrapped in thick gauze. When she opened her eyes, she saw a crowd of people around her bed. Both the Hayes and the Sterling families were there. "Cora, are you all right? Sweetheart, does it still hurt? Cora, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Cora shook her head, a look of confusion in her eyes. "Mom, Dad, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. Why are you all here?" The others froze, sensing something was wrong. Ethan stood closest to her, but he was the only one she hadn't greeted. He saw it too and spoke slowly. "Cora, are you okay?" Cora's gaze finally shifted to him, but her eyes were filled with the detached curiosity one saves for a stranger. "Excuse me, sir, but who are you?" Chapter 5, her words hung in the air, and everyone froze. Had she lost her memory? And had she only forgotten the one person she loved most in the world? Ethan was stunned for a few seconds, but as he looked directly into Cora's eyes, he quickly understood. She was faking it. Arthur and Alina Sterling looked at Cora in shock. "You really don't remember?" Cora clutched her head, feigning a headache. "I honestly don't know him." Only Ethan remained composed, quietly watching her performance. After a few seconds, he spoke coolly. "You're right. We don't know each other." He turned to leave. Cora's expression faltered. She hadn't expected him to be so ruthless. On instinct, she reached out and grabbed his sleeve. Then she realized her cover was blown. Her hand was stuck. Letting go would be an admission, but holding on was just as damning. She had to brazen it out. "I really have lost my memory." Ethan had only been testing her. Seeing her desperate grab, he reached over and picked up her medical report from the bedside table. The doctor said the impact didn't cause any cerebral hematoma. How could you have amnesia? Hearing this, the four parents finally breathed a sigh of relief and gave Cora an exasperated look. You child, you scared us to death. As long as you're okay. We'll leave you two to talk things out. The four of them filed out of the room. Cora couldn't keep up the act any longer. She had just wanted to try a different strategy to win him over. She never imagined he wouldn't fall for it at all, exposing her in just a few minutes. Feeling utterly defeated, she said listlessly, clinging to you doesn't work, playing hard to get doesn't work. Can't you just step off your pedestal and look at me for once? Ethan just found her childish. He frowned slightly. I have no interest in matters of love. Stop wasting your time on me. With those few words, he dismissed her and left. Cora was left alone in the hospital room. The freshly inked lotus on her back still felt warm, but her heart was growing cold. It seemed that no matter what she did, it was a dead end. Though the car accident wasn't severe, she still spent a few days in the hospital. Once Ethan confirmed she was fine, he never came back. He did, however, hire a team of nurses to care for her as if she were a princess. It was, undoubtedly, another way to avoid being in her debt. After she was discharged, Elinor Sterling invited her to the Sterling estate. This time it was to thank her for saving Ethan's life. Ethan, forced to attend, came home as well. At the dinner table, Elinor repeatedly tried to steer the conversation, praising Cora's beauty, her charm, and her unwavering devotion to Ethan. Cora blushed at the compliments, but when she glanced up, the man in question acted as if he couldn't hear a thing, his expression unchanged. As soon as dinner was over, he retreated to his study to work. This time, even Elinor was getting anxious. A daughter-in-law like Cora was a rare find. If she was truly scared away, it would be a terrible loss. An idea formed in Elinor's mind. She leaned close to Cora's ear and whispered a suggestion. Cora hesitated. Auntie, I'm not sure that's a good idea. What's not good about it? Elinor nudged her. It's time for a desperate measure. Cora still felt it was a terrible idea, but with her time running out, she knew she couldn't afford to be picky. As night fell, Cora drank a lot of wine. Half drunk, she staggered upstairs and into Ethan's bedroom. She collapsed onto his bed, pulling at her white dress until it was artfully disheveled, her shoulders bare. When Ethan finished his work and returned, this was the scene that greeted him. Cora's cheeks were flushed, her fair shoulders and collarbones exposed, her gaze hazy as she looked at him. Ethan? Any normal man would have been captivated, but this was Ethan Sterling. His face immediately hardened. He grabbed his suit jacket from the nearby rack and threw it over her. His calm eyes were devoid of all desire. You have 1 minute to leave. Chapter 6. Thankfully, Cora was drunk. Otherwise, she would have been so mortified she'd have wanted to jump out the window. To climb into a man's bed only to be thrown out, it was the ultimate humiliation. Her almond-shaped eyes, watery and innocent from the alcohol, gazed at him. Go where? Ethan's hands clenched into fists, as if he were restraining something. The next second, he hauled her off the bed. Downstairs in the living room, Elinor had been hoping the deed was finally about to be done. Instead, she saw her son dragging a bewildered-looking Cora down the stairs. Ethan, what are you doing? Ethan didn't stop. She's drunk. I'm taking her home. The next morning, Cora woke up in her own bed in her own home. Memories of the previous night flooded back. The failed seduction, being unceremoniously sent home, she was so embarrassed she rolled around in bed, groaning. Because of it, she didn't have the nerve to seek him out for a full day. But with only about 10 days left, Cora had to swallow her shame. She soon found out that Ethan was attending an industry summit that weekend. Cora pulled some strings to get an invitation and followed him there. The summit was a gathering of industry elites. Cora, dressed inconspicuously, sat in a corner. Even in such a staid environment, Ethan was a magnetic presence. Cora watched as a parade of beautiful women from the industry tried to flirt with him under the guise of conversation, but he treated them all with the same polite indifference. After the evening banquet began, even more people approached him to offer toasts. Mr. Sterling, I have a project I'd like to discuss. Perhaps we could talk in my room later tonight? Mr. Sterling, I'm very interested in the new technology Sterling Group has developed. Could you tell me more about it? One woman even pretended to have low blood sugar and leaned against him. Surrounded by beautiful women, Ethan simply held his sandalwood beads, his expression unchanging. He called over Penelope Quinn and had her fend them off. But then he was pulled away by other men. In the world of fame and fortune, such socializing was unavoidable. Halfway through the banquet, Cora saw Ethan stumble out of the hall. She could tell he'd had too much to drink. Seizing the opportunity, she followed him. In the hallway, Ethan felt himself getting drunk unusually quickly. His steps were unsteady. Just as he was about to fall, Cora caught him. He looked up and saw her smiling at him eagerly. "Are you drunk? Should I help you to your room to rest?" Ethan frowned, about to push her away. But suddenly, a wave of heat surged through his lower abdomen. He stiffened, immediately sensing something was wrong. The heat rushed upward, making his head spin. A dark glint appeared in Ethan's eyes. He glanced at the fawning Cora beside him and assumed it was her doing. He shoved her away violently, his voice like ice. "Cora, even if you resort to such despicable methods, I will never touch you. Get out." Cora was thrown so hard she nearly hit the wall. Though confused, she quickly realized what was wrong with him. He was sweating, his face flushed. It looked like he'd been drugged. She quickly grabbed his arm. "I'll take you to the hospital." They were close, and the sweet scent of her perfume filled his nostrils, fanning the flames inside him. Ethan knew that Cora would never refuse him, no matter what he did. But with extreme self-control, he pushed her away again. To clear his head, he pulled a small knife from his waistband and slashed his own arm without hesitation. Hiss! He sucked in a sharp breath of pain, but the agony brought a sliver of clarity. Cora stared at his bleeding arm, stunned. "You'd rather hurt yourself than be near me?" She bit her lip. "Do you hate me that much?" A wave of despair washed over her as she stared at him, demanding an answer. But Ethan's eyes were cold, his voice frigid. "Consider this a repayment for saving my life. There won't be a next time." He still thought she was the one who had drugged him. Chapter 7, just as Cora was about to explain, Penelope Quinn appeared. She saw the injured Ethan and gasped. "Mr. Sterling, what happened?" Ethan said flatly, "Take me to the hospital." Cora was devastated. He would rather have his secretary take him than her Penelope shot her a triumphant look and helped Ethan away. Cora stood frozen in place, her eyes dull and lifeless. After that, Ethan became even more distant, his rejection colder than ever. When Cora tried to explain, he wouldn't listen. When she tried to corner him at the office, Penelope smugly blocked her way. When she went to the Sterling estate to find him, she learned that he had moved out just to avoid her. System alert. 3 days remaining. Host, you must give it your all. The mechanical voice spurred Cora into action. She had no choice but to go to the apartment building where Ethan was now living alone. Downstairs, the wind was cold and desolate. Cora called Ethan's number. "I need to talk to you." His voice on the other end was cool. "We have nothing to talk about." But Cora was stubborn. "I'm waiting downstairs at your apartment. I'm not leaving until you come out and see me." She looked up and saw a tall, slender silhouette behind the curtains of an upper-floor window. But she had underestimated Ethan's heartlessness. "Suit yourself." With those 2 words, he hung up. Cora stared up at his window, her eyes stinging. True to her word, she didn't move an inch, waiting stubbornly downstairs. By evening, the temperature had dropped sharply, and snowflakes began to drift from the sky. The first snow of the year had come so early. Soon, Cora was covered in a layer of white, the biting wind stinging her face. But still, she didn't leave. She waited outside his apartment building for the entire night. And she was drenched by the falling snow for the entire night. The next day, the snow stopped, but it had accumulated to calf-deep on the ground. Cora was nearly frozen solid, a human snowman, when she finally saw Ethan's car emerge from the parking garage. She immediately stepped out, blocking his path with outstretched arms. When Ethan saw her, covered from head to toe in snow, a flicker of something new appeared in his cold eyes. She had really waited here all night. Today was his day to go to Serenity Peak Monastery for meditation, and he was never late. But this time, he rolled down the window. Cora was so cold her words were clipped and shaky. "What happened last time? It really wasn't me. I didn't drug you." He looked at her pale little face with a complex expression, remembering the call he'd received that morning. His special assistant had already investigated. Someone else had indeed been responsible for the drugging. but he never imagined that Cora would wait all night in the snow just to explain it to him. Ethan was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly asked, "Cora, do you really love me that much?" Cora nodded without hesitation. Ethan flicked a sandalwood bead between his fingers, his gaze as calm as an autumn lake. "If that's the case, then prove it to me." "How do I prove it?" Ethan held out his elegant left hand and gestured for her to lean closer. Cora did as she was told, and he whispered something in her ear. Half an hour later, she appeared at the base of Serenity Peak Monastery. Besides the main road, there was another path up the mountain. It was also a famous local attraction known as the Stairway of 10,000 Prayers. As the name suggested, it consisted of 99 steps leading directly to the monastery. Ethan had said that if she could ascend the entire stairway on her knees in sincere prayer, he would give her a chance. She looked up at the steps, which seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, and her heart trembled. But the thought of Ethan gave her resolve. With a soft thud, she knelt. Chapter 8, with each step, she knelt, immediately drawing the attention of the tourists at the base of the mountain. "Whoa, isn't that the heiress from the Hayes family? What is she doing?" "Making a wish." "Is she really that devout?" But Cora seemed deaf to their chatter. Every step was covered in snow, and she left deep imprints as she went. After what felt like an eternity, the steps were marked not just with footprints, but with her blood. Her knees were raw and bleeding, the crimson drops mingling with the white snow like red plum blossoms blooming. It hurt so much. It was so cold. It would be a lie to say she wasn't heartbroken. Even the chance he was willing to give her was so cruel. But still, she gritted her teeth and continued her ascent, one kneeling step at a time. As long as there was a chance, as long as she could bring this ascetic down from his divine pedestal, even if it was just the slimmest of chances, she had to try. The wind howled, and heavy snow blanketed the mountain. Her body was racked with shivers, but she endured the bitter cold, kneeling for a full day and night. By the time Cora shakily completed the final step, she was completely numb. The blood on her legs had frozen. Her face was ashen, her lips purple, as she walked toward Serenity Peak Monastery. Just then, the system's warning sounded, "Final day of mission." If the host fails to complete the task, termination will be initiated. Cora took a deep breath and stumbled toward a room in the back courtyard of the temple. Inside the chamber, Ethan sat across from the abbot, Mason. Just as Cora raised her frozen hand to knock, she heard Abbot Mason's gentle voice from within. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Hayes has proven her sincerity by completing her penance. Will you truly accept her now?" Cora's hand froze. She felt a sudden pang of anxiety. Ethan's reply was swift and decisive. "No, in my eyes, she is no different from any other woman. I have no interest in her." In that instant, the strength that had sustained Cora for the entire night vanished without a trace. She stood frozen, a chill spreading from the very core of her being. Abbot Mason asked again, "Then why did you make her prove herself? Why did you give her hope?" Ethan was silent for a long moment before answering. "I wasn't giving her hope. I was trying to make her give up." Of course. Ascending 99 steps on your knees in the middle of winter, it was an impossible task. Who would be foolish enough to risk their life to complete it? From the very beginning, Ethan had never believed she would do it. He had never intended to give her a chance. "You truly don't like her?" The cold words came again. "I could never love her." Hearing this, Cora's heart stopped. She squeezed her bloodshot eyes shut. At that moment, she finally knew she had failed completely. No matter how many times she offered her heart to Ethan Sterling, he would never even glance at it. Cora couldn't bear to hear anymore. Trembling, she turned and left. She walked away from Serenity Peak Monastery in a daze, completely unaware that after she was gone, the conversation inside continued. Abbot Mason's voice was old and wise. "If that is so, then why, Mr. Sterling, did you spend all last night looking down the mountain path? Who were you waiting for?" This time, no answer came from within the room. Meanwhile, Cora wandered aimlessly down the road. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "She's no different from any other woman. How ridiculous." She had given her all for 5 years, yet she was still no different from anyone else. This failed mission, it wasn't just her life that was being terminated, but her one-sided love as well. A bitter taste filled Cora's mouth, and she laughed at herself. She walked until she reached a deserted, snow-covered clearing, where the white drifts seemed deep enough to swallow a person whole. An overwhelming exhaustion washed over her. Covered in blood, Cora simply sat down in the snow. She was tired. She didn't want to fight a losing battle anymore. Cora lay back on the ground, quietly waiting for the end to come. Chapter 9, the system began to flash frantically. Warning, final 60 seconds of mission. Host termination imminent. Warning, final 30 seconds of mission. Host termination imminent. Warning, final 10 seconds of mission. Host termination imminent. Cora managed a small, relieved smile. Goodbye, Ethan Sterling. She slowly closed her eyes. Countdown, 10, 9, 8, 7. Warning, system error, rebooting unbelievably. The countdown stopped halfway through as the system crashed. After a long silence, a golden interface reappeared. Cora was bewildered. What's happening? System has detected a world stream anomaly during host's initial assignment, resulting in a target allocation error. Termination sequence aborted. Even for a machine, Cora could almost hear the embarrassment in its tone. What do you mean, target allocation error? Don't tell me. You gave me the wrong guy from the start? The person I was supposed to win over was never Ethan Sterling. Her voice was filled with disbelief. The system remained silent for a long time. Apologies. The host's original target was Julian Vance, CEO of Vance Corporation. The system has now been corrected. The host may reselect the target. No wonder. It all made sense now. Ethan was immune to romance. It was impossible that the system would assign her such an unbreakable target. And Julian Vance, she had certainly heard of him. He was the notorious playboy of the capital's elite circles, a man who had supposedly never been serious about any woman. Though winning him over would also be difficult. It was infinitely easier than making an ascetic like Ethan Sterling fall from his divine pedestal. Cora's heart had already grown cold toward Ethan. It seemed even fate wanted her to start over. Host, please confirm. Do you wish to change the mission target to the originally intended Julian Vance? This time, Cora slowly stood up, her gaze firm. Yes, confirm. Ethan's meditation retreat at Serenity Peak Monastery lasted 10 days. For once, Cora did not come to disturb him. He assumed that this time, she had finally given up. After all, no one had ever managed to ascend the stairway of 10,000 prayers on their knees. But for some reason, when he stepped out of his room and saw the empty path up the mountain, he felt a strange hollowness in his chest for the first time. I must have been on the mountain for too long. He turned to leave, but then his assistant called. Mr. Sterling, we found a video of Miss Hayes online. The assistant's voice was hesitant. Ethan sensed something was wrong. What video? The video of Miss Hayes. Ascending the stairway on her knees. Ethan's eyes darkened. Send it to me, he commanded. The assistant quickly sent the video. When he opened it, he saw Cora, just as described, kneeling her way up the stairway of 10,000 prayers. A crowd of onlookers was filming her. In the video, Cora's face was deathly pale, blood stained the ground around her, but she kept going. A sudden tightness gripped Ethan's chest. So she hadn't backed down that day. She had really done it. But why didn't she come to see me afterward? Watching the stubborn, fragile girl in the video, he felt an unfamiliar wave of agitation. No, this isn't me. Ethan Sterling's heart was never moved by anyone. He closed his eyes, his fingers tightening around the dark sandalwood beads. But even reciting calming sutras couldn't quiet his mind. The restlessness grew stronger. He walked to the temple's most sacred wishing tree and pressed his palms together. Disciple Ethan Sterling, devoted to my path. I do not know why my heart is stirred today. I pray to remove this karmic obstacle and restore my clarity. After his prayer, he took a red wishing ribbon from the side to hang it. But among the countless ribbons on the tree, he saw a familiar name. May Ethan Sterling find peace, joy, and success in all things. Cora Hayes, March 12, 2019, he stepped closer and realized the tree was covered in wishes left by Cora. May Ethan Sterling live a full life, free of worry for 100 years. Cora Hayes, July 5, 2019, may all of Ethan Sterling's wishes come true and his life be smooth. Cora Hayes, October 11, 2021, may Ethan Sterling and Cora Hayes come to understand each other's hearts and fall in love. Cora Hayes, September 21, 2023. Chapter 10, so for all these years, Cora had been making wishes for him. As he read them, a tightness formed in Ethan's throat, as if a giant hand were squeezing his heart. Flashes of memories appeared before his eyes. Cora staying by his bedside day and night when he was sick. Cora dozing off beside him as he prayed. Cora throwing herself in front of a speeding car to protect him. He realized now that he hadn't been blind to her actions over the years. He could recall every single one. Just then, Abbot Mason walked over. Ethan placed a hand over his rapidly beating heart. "Abbot, what is happening to me?" Abbot Mason looked at the red ribbon in his hand and shook his head. "Mr. Sterling, your heart is in turmoil." Ethan's throat felt tight. "My heart is in turmoil. What should I do?" "You must follow your heart." Ethan gripped the prayer beads, feeling like a traveler lost in a storm, needing to break through the swirling dust to see where he stood and where his heart truly lay. That night, for the first time in years, Ethan left the mountain early. Abbot Mason had told him, "You won't find your answers here. You need to see the person you are meant to see." But this time, the road down the mountain was clear. There was no one waiting to block his path. It was as if Cora had vanished completely. The person who used to be just a few steps away was nowhere to be found. A full month passed like this. Ethan thought coming down from the mountain would bring clarity, but his heart only grew more chaotic. Even his parents noticed something was wrong. Eleanor, angry at her son's past coldness but still wanting to help him, said, "There's a gala tomorrow night. Cora will be there." Ethan was startled for a moment, but his expression quickly returned to its usual coolness. "I'm not going." His mother stormed off in a huff. "Fine, don't go see if I care." The next day, the magnificent hotel was filled with people. In the end, he had come. The ballroom was crowded, but he spotted the long unseen Cora in an instant. She was wearing a wine-red gown, her makeup exquisite, smiling radiantly at someone else. A strange vexation tightened in Ethan's chest, because he suddenly realized that the question he had wrestled with for a month had been answered the very second he saw her. For the first time, Ethan Sterling walked toward her. "Why haven't you come to see me lately?" Cora looked up, clearly surprised to see him there. But when she looked at him, the love that had once filled her eyes was gone, replaced by a cool indifference. "Because I think you were right, Mr. Sterling. We're not right for each other. Don't worry, I won't bother you anymore." Her words struck Ethan like a physical blow, but then he thought, this must be another one of her games, playing hard to get. He suppressed the anger rising in his chest. "You know that trick doesn't work on me." Cora frowned, about to explain, when the ballroom doors opened again. A man with a roguish, handsome air walked in. Ethan watched as Cora's eyes lit up. She yanked her arm from his grasp and hurried toward the newcomer. She stood before the man with a look of mock grievance, but her eyes were shining. "Julian, it's been a month. You still don't believe that I like you. I really, really like you. So much." As soon as she finished speaking, a loud crack echoed from behind her. Everyone turned at the sound, including Cora and Julian. There stood Ethan Sterling, his sandalwood prayer beads nearly crushed in his hand. The man who had always been the epitome of self-control looked like he had lost his mind. He strode forward, grabbed Cora's arm in a death grip, his cold eyes blazing with rage and disbelief. "Say that again. Who did you say you love?" Chapter 11. Cora truly didn't understand how Ethan, after everything he'd said, had the audacity to ask her that question. She didn't believe for a second that he'd suddenly fallen in love with her. It was more likely he was just feeling the absence of his ever-present, doting follower and was reacting to that loss. But glancing at Julian Vance, who was watching the scene with clear amusement, Cora knew this was the perfect opportunity to win his favor. Julian Vance, the CEO of Vance Corporation, was the Sterling family's biggest business rival. Even Cora, who paid little attention to her family's commercial dealings, had heard about their fierce competition. And just as their businesses were polar opposites, so were the two men. Ethan was cold and distant, like the purest winter snow, so flawless it inspired a desire to possess and tarnish it, yet everyone knew that getting too close would leave you frozen. Julian, on the other hand, was an open flame. He had the face of a romantic rogue, and his charming eyes could make anyone feel they were wrapped in the deepest affection. His reputation matched his looks. He was famous throughout the elite circles for his romantic escapades, but he never mistreated his girlfriends and never dated two people at once. When he initiated a breakup, he always provided a generous compensation package. This made him irresistible to many women from less prominent families, as his kindness was legendary, and each one believed she could be the one to finally tame him. Comparing the two, winning over Julian was infinitely easier than winning over Ethan. After discovering this, Cora couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. The system, feeling guilty for its mistake, even activated a favorability meter for her, allowing her to track Julian's feelings with a reliable metric. Though she could only bind it to one person at a time, it was a huge help when dealing with a target who might not voice his feelings. Cora decisively linked the meter to Julian. Facing the furious Ethan, a deep pain flickered in her eyes, but she quickly pressed herself against Julian's side. The gown she wore was a runway piece, with a daring cutout at the chest that contrasted beautifully with her pale skin, and her face was flushed and captivating. Julian was more than happy to have a beauty in his arms. He casually wrapped an arm around her bare shoulders, his hand resting lightly, not at all improperly. Cora looked up at him, her voice soft. "Of course, the one I like is brother Julian." Seeing the favorability meter tick up by 2 points, Cora secretly gritted her teeth. This Julian isn't so easy to fool. Either all thoughts of discipline and asceticism vanished from Ethan's mind. In his fury, his eyes turned slightly red, and he gripped the prayer beads so tightly they creaked. Cora felt a flicker of fear and shrank back, muttering, "What's your problem? You can ignore me for years, but I can't fall for someone else. You're not the only man in the world." She heard a muffled chuckle from above and looked up suspiciously at Julian, who quickly smoothed his expression, though the laughter still lingered in his eyes. The system prompted. Julian Vance's favorability has increased by 1 point. Cora was bewildered. A direct declaration of love gets 2 points, but insulting Ethan gets 1? But seeing the look on Ethan's face, she didn't dare say more. While high society in this modern age wasn't strictly hierarchical, a pecking order still existed. If the Vance and Sterling families were top tier, the Hayes family was, at best, a step below. If Ethan truly lost his temper, the Hayes family would be powerless. Chapter 12, Ethan spat out a harsh, "From now on, we go our separate ways," then turned and left. Cora clutched her chest, her heart still pounding with fear. Julian, who had been observing the drama for some time, finally let out a laugh. With his eyebrows arched and eyes curved, he looked every bit the charming rogue. He was, without a doubt, one of the most handsome men Cora had ever seen. She blushed, saying awkwardly, "I wasn't just using you as a shield just now. I really do like you." Cora blinked, trying to convey this message. Julian just smiled at her again. "Did he bully you?" Everyone in their circle knew about Cora's years-long, fruitless pursuit of Ethan. This was the first time anyone had asked so gently if she had been bullied. A wave of unexpected sorrow washed over her. "Yes," she said, a little dejected. "Haven't you heard the jokes about me?" "What jokes?" Julian's voice was gentle. He reached out and lightly cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a non-existent tear from the corner of her eye. "Don't be a crybaby. Tell me about it." Cora couldn't tell if he genuinely hadn't heard or was just amusing himself at her expense. But the system showed his favorability at 25%, which meant he didn't dislike her. "Just that I'm shameless," she said, trying to sound casual. "Chasing after a guy for years without getting so much as a glance. Someone even turned that video of me kneeling on the stairs into a meme." The Hayes family had tried to clean up the negative press, but they were also displeased with her behavior, so their efforts weren't exactly wholehearted. They had mostly just removed the most viral videos. His favorability didn't drop. Cora breathed a sigh of relief. She heard Julian say, "That just shows you're passionate and sincere about love, Cora. That's not a bad thing." There was no condescension in his eyes, only sincerity. Cora felt that even if she couldn't win him over, being his friend would be wonderful. But this was about her survival. She had to strive for 100%. She gave a weak laugh. "I was so foolish before, always trying to hang myself from the same crooked tree. And now you've found a new crooked tree?" Julian found her adorable. He smiled. "You were just accepting my room key a moment ago. How careless of you." Cora's face turned beet red. She said defensively, "It doesn't have to mean anything. Can't two people just chat in a room?" She looked so young. Julian sighed and gently ruffled her carefully styled hair, handing her a card. It wasn't a standard business card from a box in his office. It was exquisitely designed and minimalist, with only his last name and phone number embossed in gold foil on black suede. "We can chat anywhere," Julian said with a smile. "Getting a suite just to talk seems like a waste. Cora, this is my personal number. Next time you're being bullied, you can call me anytime." For weeks, Cora had been unable to get any closer to Julian. She had tried through various contacts to get his personal number, all to no avail. And now, she'd gotten it just by provoking Ethan a little. She was thrilled. She pulled out her own card. In contrast to Julian's, hers had a much warmer color palette. Cora pressed a light kiss to the card, leaving a faint, pink lipstick mark incomplete, which only made it more suggestive. She tucked the card into the breast pocket of his suit jacket, where a pocket square was neatly folded. Her cheeks were flushed with shyness. "Please remember to contact me, too. I'll be waiting for your call." A lady should never be the first one to dial, right? Her actions were bold, yet her expression was shy. Julian's gaze deepened for a moment before he returned to his usual suave demeanor. He held the card between his fingers and brushed his nose against the dried lipstick mark, smiling slightly. "Peach," Julian murmured. "Cora, you taste like peaches." Chapter 13. It wasn't until she stepped out of the venue and into the crisp night air that Cora's face began to cool down. Since the system had made its mistake, it had started responding to her comments more often. Cora complained in her mind, "Wow, this Julian guy is on another level. I'm not sure I can handle him." The system was silent for a while. Just as Cora thought it was going to ignore her again, the electronic voice said, "Don't you like Ethan Sterling? Ethan is ancient history. From today on, I'm focusing on Julian. I need to get this sword of Damocles from over my head." The system knew she was still being stubborn but didn't call her out on it. "Very well. Good luck." The Hayes family car was parked some distance from the main entrance. In her high heels, Cora's walk was unsteady. Her heel caught in the crack of a patterned paving stone, and she pitched forward, nearly taking a nosedive in front of everyone. But a pair of strong arms caught her, pulling her back. Cora's heart leaped. Her bare back was pressed against a man's warm chest, the faint scent of sandalwood filling her senses. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Ethan Sterling. "Let go," she said. He had been holding her for a while now, and the curious stares from the crowd were making her skin crawl. Ethan had always been a man of faith, sometimes even adopting a vegetarian diet during his retreats, but he was far from frail. The muscles of his chest pressed against her through the thin fabric of his clothes, making her feel flustered. After a long moment, he finally released her waist. "She's so slender," Ethan thought. "Doesn't she eat enough? She always seemed to have a good appetite." "Why didn't you leave with Julian?" he asked, forcefully turning her to face him. His grip was tight. "Isn't he the one you like so much now?" The pressure made Cora wince. "Didn't you snap the room key he gave me in half? What's next? Are you going to snap my bones?" she retorted. Ethan realized he was using too much force. He froze for a second, then loosened his grip. Cora took the opportunity to step away from him and stalked angrily toward her family's car. She was wearing a strapless, backless gown today. Ethan stared at her retreating back. As she moved, the fabric would occasionally shift, revealing a glimpse of pale skin and the edge of the red lotus tattoo. It was vivid and delicate, like a drop of blood on freshly fallen snow. Once inside the warmth of the car, Cora finally realized how cold she was. She had forgotten to put her coat back on. The driver started the engine. "Miss, where to?" After she came of age, her family had given her several small villas. Cora thought for a moment, then decided to go home. She had been too embarrassed to face her parents after her last stunt. Chapter 14. She had expected a lecture upon returning home, but to her surprise, her parents were sitting on the sofa with grim expressions, and they said nothing to her. Cora changed her clothes and came downstairs, playing the part of the dutiful daughter. "Dad, Mom," she said, sidling up to them cautiously, "have you eaten yet?" "We've eaten," her father said, his face stern but his tone gentle. "Did you have a good time at the party?" "It was okay. I'm still a little hungry." Her gown had been so form-fitting that she hadn't dared to have more than a bite of dessert. Her mother shot her an exasperated look. Always thinking about food. She instructed the staff to bring out the meal they had saved for her. Her father then said, "I saw you getting quite close to that Vance boy today." Cora knew they would question her, but she hadn't expected them to be so direct. She nearly choked on a piece of cake. After a fit of coughing, the housekeeper rushed over with a glass of water. Her mother grumbled, "Couldn't you have picked a better time to ask?" Seeing that her parents were about to argue, Cora quickly interjected, "Yes, I've decided. I'm not going to waste any more time on Ethan Sterling. I'm going to start pursuing Julian." They were both aware of Julian's reputation. He was a playboy, yes, but that was better than the emotional torment Ethan put her through. An amicable breakup down the line would be fine. Over the past few years, Cora had lowered their expectations considerably. As long as she wasn't fixated on Ethan, they were fine with anything. But Cora was a little puzzled. She knew they had people keeping an eye on her, but there was no way they could have known what happened at the party before she even got home. When she cautiously brought it up, her mother gave her a look as if she were an idiot. "Go online and search for that incident again." Cora took out her phone and noticed an unread friend request. She first searched for the video of her kneeling. Not only was the search term gone, but even the memes trolls had made from it had been completely scrubbed. "It couldn't have been Julian, could it?" she asked in shock, doing a deeper search. It was true, every trace had been wiped clean. "Who else would it be?" her father snorted. "I was going to let it stay up for a few more days to teach you a lesson." What kind of father would do that? It would humiliate the whole family, Cora thought. Her mother smiled. "Oh, don't listen to him. Our daughter is very charming. Isn't it good that someone is cleaning up her messes?" Cora ignored their bickering and opened the friend request. To her surprise, it wasn't Julian, nor was it the now blocked Ethan. It was Penelope Quinn, the secretary who was always at odds with her. She was curious to see what a mere secretary could possibly want. She let the request sit for a long while before finally accepting. The message that came through was blunt. "Cora, what kind of game are you playing now? Do you have any idea that Mr. Sterling has barely eaten these past few days?" "He's not eating and that's my fault?" Cora scoffed. "What am I, his mother? Am I supposed to breastfeed him?" Penelope was clearly furious, sending a stream of messages that Cora found utterly toothless. These elites were too well-mannered. Before she was brought to this world, Cora was just an ordinary person. If she weren't afraid of embarrassing the Hayes family, she could have spewed insults 10 times worse. She decisively blocked Penelope, but she was still a little surprised. How could Ethan possibly stop eating because of her? If she had that much influence, would winning him over have been so difficult all these years? Impossible. That Penelope woman was probably blaming her for every grain of rice Ethan didn't eat. Chapter 15. After a week with no word from Julian, Cora was getting antsy. The system reminded her of her progress or lack thereof every day like an alarm clock. Without seeing Julian, she had no way of knowing if his favorability was rising or falling. All she could do was worry. Although she had given Julian her contact information, it was up to him whether he actually used it. But staring at the gold embossed card in her hand, Cora bit her lip. Every idle day felt like a countdown to her demise. Whether Julian was the executioner's block or the elixir of life, she had to find out for herself. But before she could call him, her phone rang. She had blocked Ethan, but out of courtesy, she hadn't blocked his parents. As expected, it was Alina Sterling's familiar, loving voice. She chatted with Cora about trivial things for a while before finally, as the phone grew warm against her ear, revealing her true purpose. "Cora, dear, why haven't you come to visit me lately? Pinecone and I both miss you. Did you and Ethan have a fight?" "Of course not, Auntie," Cora said, forcing a smile. Despite her mental preparation, hearing Alina's voice still caused a pang of pain. "I've just been busy. I'll come see you in a few days." It's normal for young people to have disagreements. "Cora, since you're not mad at Ethan, don't wait a few days. I'm throwing a party, something you young people enjoy. Please come, won't you?" With such a heartfelt invitation, it was hard to refuse. But Cora really didn't want to be in the same room as Ethan again. Whenever she remembered what she had overheard on the mountain, a chill went through her, as if she had been stripped naked and left in a howling wind. Ethan would never love her. Her mission target was no longer this cold, heartless man. Nothing was more important than her own life. She hesitated for a moment, and Alina added, "I know it might be awkward for you too, so I've invited other young people as well. Don't worry. As long as it wasn't just the two of them, it was manageable." Cora breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. "Of course, Auntie. Which day is it? I'll clear my schedule." Alina also sounded relieved. "It's this Saturday. Are you free?" Saturday was the day after tomorrow. What could a non-working heiress like her possibly have to do? She agreed immediately. They exchanged a few more pleasantries, chatting cheerfully about the cat. Neither of them mentioned Ethan again. After hanging up, Eleanor looked at Ethan, who was standing beside her, his expression impassive but his brow slightly furrowed. She couldn't help but sigh. Her son was exceptional in every way except when it came to romance. Perhaps his years of spiritual practice had completely stunted that part of him. Pinecone let out a soft meow, leaped from the cat tree to the sofa, and snuggled into Ethan's lap. Ethan instinctively stroked its soft, fluffy fur. Pinecone, comfortable with him, rolled onto its back, purring. Eleanor watched for a moment. Girls are like kittens. If you don't pet them the right way, they get upset. Ethan, I can help you this once, but I can't help you forever. A wonderful girl like Cora. You didn't cherish her then, and now you're begging me to invite her for you. Be careful, or you'll watch your bride slip right through your fingers. Ethan's lips were pressed into a thin line. She's not my bride, he said stiffly. Eleanor knew he was just being stubborn. I heard that Vance boy has taken an interest in Cora, she said pointedly. She's just using him to make me angry, Ethan said with conviction. This isn't the first time she's done something like this. Chapter 16, a long time ago, Cora had indeed tried to make Ethan jealous. She deliberately brought another man with her to the monastery where Ethan was meditating. Ethan, with his eyes closed, ignored her childish games. But she insisted on approaching him, asking with a sweet smile, Master, I'd like to pray for a long and happy relationship with my boyfriend. Is that possible? This is not the hall for romantic blessings, Ethan had said coldly. And I am not a master. Cora wasn't offended by the public dismissal. She let go of the other man's hand and knelt before Ethan, cupping her face in her hands. Then what is this place for? Ethan didn't want to answer, but he knew if he didn't, she would just keep bothering him. He suppressed his irritation. This is a place to pray for safety and peace. Cora feigned enlightenment. Oh, then I've come to the right place. She took a red ribbon and left happily. Ethan watched her go, finding himself wondering, has she been in some kind of danger recently? Why else would she suddenly come to pray for safety? A wind chime on the eaves of the hall tinkled. Ethan shook off his scattered thoughts, his hand tightening around his prayer beads. Looking back now, he realized that even then, Cora had been praying for his well-being. Ethan had to admit that perhaps, from the very beginning, he had been quietly observing the young woman who was always fluttering around him. But his faith taught that all desire leads to suffering, and to be without desire is to be strong. He couldn't and wouldn't admit that his spiritual resolve had been broken, that he had developed feelings for her. Eleanor was indeed the best person to invite Cora. Although Ethan was aware of his feelings, he was still too proud to beg for Cora's forgiveness. Serenity Peak Monastery, the stairway of 10,000 prayers, 9,999 steps. Each one stained with Cora's tears and blood. He had been truly, deeply wrong. The event hosted by the Sterling family was exclusive. Only the elite were invited. Although Cora had little interest in seeing Ethan, she still took the time to dress up. The night before the party, she received a call from Julian. The man's voice, already elegant and deep, was even more alluring through the phone speaker. After learning that Julian was her target, Cora had her family look into the Vance family. She learned that Julian hadn't grown up on the mainland. As a result, his accent lacked the typical cadence of the capital's elite, instead carrying a hint of southern charm. Cora couldn't help but cover her blushing cheeks, thinking that having a good voice was practically cheating. Miss Hayes, Julian chuckled, I've been busy the last few days and couldn't call you sooner. It's no problem, Cora said, a little embarrassed. She hadn't been busy, but she hadn't called him either. Is there something urgent? Julian's voice dropped to a low murmur. Nothing urgent, but something quite elegant. Are you attending the Sterling's event tomorrow? I am, Cora replied. She didn't know the specifics of the event. What's elegant about it? Mr. Vance, will you be there too? If Miss Hayes is going, how could I possibly miss it? His words were incredibly flirtatious. If she hadn't seen for herself how low his favorability was barely in the friend category, she might have believed him. She let out a small tusk and said to the system in her mind, he really is a notorious playboy. He's so smooth. The system's mechanical voice for once held a hint of disdain. Host, perhaps you should focus on the phone call. who chats with their mission target while simultaneously complaining to a system in their head. The system knew that Cora was not as infatuated with Julian as she had been with Ethan, which was a small relief. A host who could detach their personal emotions was exactly what they wanted. Chapter 17, Julian briefly explained the Sterling's event to Cora, and then she understood what he meant by elegant. Saturday was the Lantern Festival on the lunar calendar. The Sterlings had rented out a classical garden and set up a lantern festival with riddles and games. There were also several activities with a very strong matchmaking undertone. It sounded like a large-scale matchmaking event for the children of prominent families. No wonder Julian had called to ask if she was going. In his eyes, she must have seemed like a hypocrite professing her feelings for him while planning to scope out new prospects at a matchmaking party. Cora blushed. She explained that she hadn't known the true nature of the event, but Julian just laughed. "I look forward to seeing you there tomorrow," he said warmly. "May I call you Cora?" "Of course. That's what my parents call me." Julian paused. "I don't think I'm aiming to be a parental figure." The comment was so blatantly flirtatious that Cora could feel her face getting hotter. The system chimed in with a rare observation. "You humans are such good actors. It's so easy for you to say you love someone you don't, and that you don't love someone you do." Cora didn't understand what it meant. She was busy rummaging through her closet for a suitable outfit for the next day and just mumbled a response. On the day of the Lantern Festival, the capital was still covered in a layer of snow. The red lanterns reflecting off the white ground created a beautiful scene. But the moment she stepped out of the car, Cora regretted her choice of attire. She had forgotten that most of the event would be outdoors and had worn only a thin gown. Her nose turned red from the cold. She tried to hurry inside, but with each step, the biting chill intensified. A Sterling family servant saw her and was taken aback. "Miss Hayes, do you need a blanket?" "Yes, please." "Thank you." It might not look elegant, but it was better than freezing to death. More guests began to arrive, many of whom Cora recognized. They were also in formal wear, yet none of them seemed to feel the cold. Cora, on the other hand, was shivering. Did these people secretly evolve without me? She muttered to herself, "Why am I the only one huddled up like a quail?" A soft chuckle came from behind her. A moment later, a warm overcoat was draped over her shoulders. Cora turned, bewildered, to see Julian standing under the red glow of a lantern. He seemed to have just arrived, impeccably dressed in a suit, his shirt perfectly crisp. He smiled at her. "Even if you are a quail, you're the most beautiful one." Cora was momentarily stunned. A second later, she gushed to the system in her mind, "Forget his favorability score, I think mine is about to max out." "System, you said the same thing about Ethan Sterling. You just fall for pretty faces, don't you?" Speak of the devil. Just as she was mentally comparing Ethan and Julian's looks, she saw Ethan walking toward them. He was holding a fleece blanket and was scanning the area for her. As he approached, his gaze fell on Julian. Cora watched as his expression soured, his brows knitting together and his lips pressing into a thin, unforgiving line. She remembered all the times Ethan had looked at her with that same expression. Cora sighed. It was only now, as an observer, that she realized just how annoying she must have been. Ethan's voice was cold. "I don't recall the Vance family being on the guest list. To what do we owe the pleasure, Mr. Vance?" Julian was unruffled. "Mr. Sterling Sr. didn't refuse my request yesterday," he said with a smile. "How could you accuse me of crashing your party?" Chapter 18. The rivalry between the Vance and Sterling families was nothing new. So when Arthur Sterling received a respectful call from Julian asking if he could attend the party, he was so flattered that he immediately agreed. Betrayed by his own father, the crease between Ethan's eyebrows deepened. Cora's voice was weak. "Gentlemen, have either of you considered that I'm about to freeze to death? Ethan, isn't that blanket for me?" Just as Ethan was about to hand her the blanket, he saw the oversized coat she was wearing, and his face grew colder. "First, unblock me." Julian smirked knowingly. Cora couldn't believe how petty he was being. Her own temper flared. She wrapped the coat tighter around herself and huffed, "In your dreams," making a mistake and still being this arrogant. She clicked away on her high heels, her long, wavy hair swishing behind her. Ethan was at a loss. He genuinely was worried about her getting cold, which was why he had gotten the blanket from a servant to give to her. But when he saw her standing so intimately with Julian, wearing Julian's coat, a strange mix of anger and sourness gripped his heart. For the first time in his 20-some years, Ethan Sterling understood what jealousy felt like. Julian crossed his arms, a smile playing on his lips. He didn't seem to feel the cold at all and had the leisure to watch the expression on Ethan's face after being rejected. "Mr. Sterling, no one threatens a lady on such a cold day," he said politely. "Your method of making amends is rather clumsy." The sandalwood beads in Ethan's hand pressed together, making a soft clicking sound. He stood there, watching Julian's retreating back, his face so dark it looked like it might drip ink. Cora had no interest in watching the preening men and women outside. She found a heated room and sat with a cup of hot tea. If it weren't for how kind Alina had been to her in the past, she wouldn't have come at all. But making an impression on Julian was a nice bonus. Soon, the man she was thinking of knocked on the door, politely interrupting her daydream. "Cora," Julian said, holding a blanket. "May I sit here?" Cora felt a little shy. "Of course, there's hot tea and pastries." Julian draped the blanket over her legs. "Why are you hiding in here all by yourself? Is it too cold?" he asked with a smile. "No, the coat is very warm." Looking at his thin shirt, Cora realized he was probably cold too. "You must be freezing. Here, take your coat back." "I'm not cold," Julian said, his warm palm briefly touching the back of her hand in a gentlemanly gesture. "I was just looking for you." His gaze was gentle, so full of affection that anyone he looked at would feel deeply loved. Cora was mesmerized for a moment until the system's ding brought her back to reality. Current favorability, 35. Please continue to work hard, host. It was the perfect wake-up call. Cora was beginning to understand the system's earlier comment about saying you love someone you don't. No wonder Julian could so easily detach himself from his relationships. He only needed to invest 30% to give the appearance of 100%. Cora said with determination, "I need to learn from him." System, Cora, that way I won't fall in love with Ethan and get my heart broken. The system sounded exasperated. After a long pause, it said, "It's hard to say who's more heartbroken right now." Chapter 19, the doors and windows in the classical garden were antique style, with thin paper screens that did little to hide the two figures sitting close together inside. Snow had begun to fall again, and a light dusting settled on Ethan's shoulders. He felt a chill in the palm of his hand. Had Cora really stopped loving him? He wondered in a daze, why does it feel so real? To any observer, they looked like a perfectly matched couple. Even Ethan had to admit it. This was different from the time she had deliberately tried to make him jealous. The way Cora looked at Julian now was the same way she had looked at him 1,000 times before, shining like the brightest stars, burning like a brilliant flame. Now, the light of those stars illuminated someone else, and the flame had left the snow it could never melt. But Cora didn't know that the stubborn exterior was just a thin layer of ice. The true snow beneath had already begun to thaw. Cora and Julian chatted for a while longer. Seeing that it was getting late, she prepared to head home. Julian smiled. "It seems I've kept you all to myself tonight. The games outside are quite fun. Would you like to try?" The warmth of the room was making Cora drowsy. She felt that if she stayed any longer, she would fall asleep. Whether it was going home or taking a walk, she needed to wake herself up. When she opened the door, she was startled to find a person standing right outside. "Ethan, when did you get here? Is eavesdropping part of your spiritual practice?" Julian's tone wasn't sharp, but his words were clearly a challenge. The snow weighed down on Ethan's shoulders. He lowered his eyes, his voice strained. "Cora, I need to talk to you." Seeing that Ethan was ignoring his jibe, Julian raised an eyebrow. He looked at Cora questioningly. She seemed a little lost but still nodded. "Mr. Vance, I'll see you next time." Julian smiled and affectionately patted her head. "All right, Cora, I'll be waiting. And you don't have to call me Mr. Vance, do you?" Cora blushed and glanced quickly at Ethan. "What should I call you then?" "Just call me Brother Julian." The nickname she had used at the gala to provoke Ethan was now being brought up again. Cora's face was flushed as she nodded. She started to take off the coat to give it back to Julian, but he stopped her. "You'll be cold. It's late, you should keep it on. My car is parked just outside. It's only a few steps. I'll be fine." Cora had no choice but to keep the coat on. "Then I'll have it cleaned and return it to you next time." Ethan's hand tightened around his prayer beads as he watched Cora see Julian off. He said in a low voice, "Cora, are you really in love with Julian?" "What's it to you?" Cora avoided his gaze. There was a heavy emotion in his eyes that she couldn't decipher and didn't want to. But Ethan just stared at her, his eyes welling up. Cora was so surprised her eyes widened. She had chased Ethan for so long, had seen him injured, sick, and frustrated, but she had never seen him show a hint of sadness. He was like a true statue of a Buddha devoid of joy or sorrow, perfectly calm. But now, was he crying? Chapter 20, but before she could determine whether the glint in his eyes was a reflection of the lanterns and snow or an actual tear, he turned his face away. His eyelashes were long, his nose perfectly straight. His entire face was like a meticulously crafted piece of porcelain, flawless. Even in this vulnerable moment, there was a heart-wrenching beauty to him. Cora rubbed her nose. She didn't understand why, even though she was the one who had been wronged, she somehow felt like the villain. "Walk with me," Ethan said softly. "Please." The Ethan of the past would never have used such a tentative tone. He would have demanded that she leave, that she stay away, that she stop her pointless efforts. His rare show of vulnerability made her agree, even though she knew she shouldn't. The party was winding down. Many guests had already left to spend the rest of the holiday with their families. The lanterns were still lit, but most of the riddles had been solved. It was, after all, a sterling family event. Whether out of respect for the hosts or for the prizes, everyone had been quite enthusiastic. The snow continued to fall gently, creating a serene and beautiful atmosphere under the warm glow of the lanterns. Cora rubbed her hands together and blew on them. Ethan noticed and pulled the oversized coat tighter around her. "Are you cold?" "Not really," Cora said, shaking her head. If not for the crisp, cold air, she would have thought she was in a dream. Logically, Ethan knew he should apologize to Cora quickly before she got sick from the cold. But he was also savoring this moment. It had been nearly a month since he'd been able to have a proper conversation with her, to walk beside her like this. Something he had once scorned had now become an unattainable luxury. Cora, Ethan, they spoke at the same time, their voices colliding like snowflakes shattering on the ground. "You go first," Cora said after a moment of silence, pursing her lips. She buried her red, frozen face in the collar of the coat and smelled a faint, unfamiliar cologne. It was completely different from the scent of sandalwood that always clung to Ethan from his years of spiritual practice. This was the blatant, masculine scent of another man. Ethan said in a low voice, "Cora, I owe you an apology. I was so arrogant back then, so sure you wouldn't have the resolve to ascend the stairway," he said, stopping to face her. "I underestimated you." Cora shook her head and laughed at herself. "It's not your fault. Who would have thought a fool would actually kneel her way up an entire mountain?" Cora wouldn't admit that, beyond the threat of termination, she had also been driven by a faint, desperate love to complete such an arduous, foolish task. A flash of pain crossed Ethan's eyes. He knew about the blood she had left on the steps that day. He knew her determination and her suffering. He deeply regretted his careless words and the pain they had caused her. So he apologized again, sincerely. Cora smiled. "It's okay, really. You don't have to feel guilty about it. I was at fault, too. I chased you for so many years, clinging to you even after you rejected me so many times. I must have caused you a lot of trouble." Ethan wanted to say no. He'd had countless opportunities to cut her off completely, but he never did. He had been soberly drowning in her love all these years, too afraid to face his own heart. But Cora continued, "I've thought it through. From now on, I won't bother you anymore, Ethan. You can rest assured, I won't be a nuisance in your life." Ethan's pupils contracted. He could hear the finality in her tone. Even though there was still a hint of sadness on her face, it was mostly overshadowed by relief. "We were never on the same path, were we? I won't be so selfish anymore. But I might still come by to see Pinecone and your mother from time to time. I'll make sure to come when you're not home, so don't worry." Chapter 21, Cora was being completely sincere. In truth, she should have stopped loving Ethan a long time ago. When a pursuer falls in love with their target, they lose the upper hand in the life or death game, essentially offering their neck to the executioner. Thankfully, the system had told her she had a second chance. But Cora didn't understand why Ethan looked so heartbroken, as if he had been genuinely hurt. One of the sandalwood beads on his wrist cracked under the pressure of his grip, falling to the stone path with a soft clatter and rolling into a snowdrift. "Oh," Cora exclaimed, about to bend down and pick it up. But her wrist was caught in a firm grasp. The man pulled her into a tight embrace. She was stunned for a moment. Ethan's voice, when he spoke next to her ear, was unsteady and filled with an unspeakable sadness. "Can't you keep bothering me?" he asked, his arms trembling around her waist. "Cora, you don't annoy me. I won't push you away. Just stay by my side, please." Cora didn't even know how she got home. She was in a complete daze. But when she collapsed onto the sofa, her first instinct was to call out to the system. Does this count as a successful mission? The system reverted to its cold, emotionless, mechanical tone. The host's current mission target is Julian Vance, not Ethan Sterling. It paused, then added, "If it were Ethan, you would no longer be in this world right now." What good would a successful mission be then? She had a point. If I were dead, I wouldn't be around to see Ethan cry anyway, Cora thought. The system seemed satisfied with her compliance. Therefore, host, do not waste any more emotional energy on irrelevant individuals. Please focus on the current target. Winning someone over was a long process, but the timeline for Julian was much shorter than it had been for Ethan. Cora had protested, but the system had explained that Julian was also a much easier target. The requirements weren't set in stone, they were adjusted based on difficulty. As long as she succeeded, she would be safe. The countdown echoed in her mind every day, a constant, morbid ticking clock. Cora didn't have time to dwell on her sadness. She had to raise Julian's favorability, and quickly. According to the system's analysis, the value had to reach at least 60% to be considered love. Right now, at best, Julian had a mild crush on her. "Can you just check Ethan's for me?" Cora pleaded. "Come on, I'm begging you. Only one person can be linked at a time. Host, please do not get distracted. You have a date with Julian soon. If you leave now, you won't be late." Cora pouted. Fine, you're so rigid. After all this time, you can't satisfy my curiosity just once." She dawdled and ended up being 10 minutes late, but Julian didn't seem angry at all. He gallantly pulled out her chair, and only after she was seated did he signal for the waiter to bring the food. The restaurant was located in the heart of the city, where real estate was worth its weight in gold. It was luxurious yet elegant, with a distinctly vintage decor. The prices on the menu did not disappoint either. Even as the heiress of the Hayes family, she couldn't help but gasp. "I feel like I'm drinking gold," she whispered. The first course was a soup. It was delicious, but absurdly expensive. Julian chuckled. "White truffles are more expensive than gold by weight." Cora hadn't realized he could hear her quiet comment. She stuck out her tongue. Julian's current status meant he didn't need a partner's family for business connections or benefits. So, whether a woman was wealthy or of humble origins, if he liked her, he would pursue her earnestly. He had taken other girls out to dinner before, and they had all strived to appear composed and elegant. But only Cora, despite being from a wealthy family, showed a charming naivety in the smallest details. Julian found it very endearing. Chapter 22, Cora had no idea that her every move was being watched by Julian. She carefully savored the dishes, which all tasted more or less the same to her, while complaining to the system in her head, "This thing costs $58,000. It's so easy to make money off rich people." The system was at a loss for words. "You're a rich person now, too." Yes, Cora put down her fork and knife after eating about a third of the steak the waiter had cut for her, pretending to be full. "Which is why I can't look like I've never seen a nice place before." Seeing that she had stopped eating, Julian thoughtfully asked the waiter to cancel the remaining courses and bring out dessert. He watched as the girl, her cheeks still round with a hint of baby fat, chewed on the berries decorating her pudding. "Cora, was the food not to your liking, or are you full?" he asked with a smile. Cora's spoon paused midair. "I'm full." Her continuous nibbling at the dessert clearly indicated otherwise. Julian couldn't help but laugh, his shoulders shaking for a moment. He called the waiter over to order more for her. Cora said, embarrassed, "No more for me, thank you." "French cuisine is like that, it's hard to feel full," Julian said, winking at her. "I'm still hungry myself. A little something sweet will lift our spirits." Cora completely agreed with him. "The desserts in the capital are just so-so," Julian said. "If you'd like, I can take you to Hong Kong. I know the city well, and there's a lot of amazing food there." Cora had heard about it and was very interested. "I've wanted to go for a long time, but I've never had the chance. Because I was always trailing after Ethan." The thought of his name brought a wave of sadness. Julian noticed and said with a smile, "Then it's a date. We'll go eat together." The system chimed in at the perfect moment. "Favorability has increased by a few points. Keep it up." Perhaps because Julian was an easier person to romance, the mission was progressing smoothly. But Ethan still came to see her from time to time. A few days later, Cora heard from someone else that Ethan had a fever. She immediately thought of the snowy night. She remembered glancing at the spot where he had stood as she left the room with Julian. The floor had been dry, with no trace of melted snow. He must have been standing there for a long time. The realization made Cora antsy. Seeing her restlessness, the system's mechanical voice held a hint of exasperation. "You knelt up all 99 of those steps for him. What does a little fever have to do with you?" "You're right," Cora agreed sincerely. "But my conscience is bothering me. He may not have a conscience, but I do." With that, she had the family driver take her to the Sterling estate. Eleanor was holding pinecone, her face etched with worry. "Oh, Cora, you're here. Ethan is delirious with fever and keeps calling your name. I wanted to call you sooner, but whenever I mentioned it, he would try to pull out his IV." Cora said awkwardly, "Auntie, I'll go see him." Her falling out with Ethan was one thing, but having his parents involved was another. Cora felt a little embarrassed. She was wearing a plush coat, her face buried in a pink scarf, looking sweet and well-behaved. Eleanor held her hand and lamented for a while before letting her go upstairs. When she saw Penelope Quinn, Cora was a little confused, but then she noticed the company documents in her hand and understood. Penelope snorted. "What are you doing here? Come to throw yourself at him again?" Chapter 23. In the past, Cora hadn't dared to provoke Penelope because she often had to bribe her for information about Ethan's whereabouts. Now that she was no longer his shadow, she stood up straight and retorted, "How many billionaire fathers do you have to be talking to me like that?" Penelope's face instantly turned red with anger. Cora had hit her right where it hurt most. Although she was talented and beautiful, her lack of a prestigious background was a deep-seated insecurity, the reason she kept her love for Ethan buried. She knew she wasn't good enough for him, and she certainly didn't think this spoiled, willful heiress was either. Ethan deserved a gentle, virtuous wife. If it couldn't be her, it definitely shouldn't be Cora. Cora didn't care how angry she was. She pushed past Penelope. "Deliver your documents and get out. This isn't your office or your home." Penelope stormed off in a huff. Cora had suspected Ethan wasn't as sick as his mother claimed, but she hadn't expected to find him sitting up and working. A private doctor sat on a nearby sofa, monitoring the IV drip. Even with a needle in his arm and under such intense scrutiny, Ethan was completely unperturbed, calmly looking at his laptop screen. If she didn't know he was managing his company, Cora would have thought he was reading Buddhist scriptures. After a quick glance to confirm he was fine, Cora turned to leave. But the sound of the door opening had already caught his attention. His usually placid eyes wavered when they landed on her. Ethan even started to throw back the covers to get out of bed. "Why are you here?" Cora said. "I just came to see how you were, if you're okay." "Mr. Sterling still has a fever," the doctor quickly interrupted. "Miss Hayes, please try to reason with him. He insists on working." Ethan, he didn't remember hiring such a meddlesome doctor. As expected, Cora frowned and walked over. "What at the company could possibly be more important than your health? Ethan, didn't you tell me that your faith teaches detachment from worldly desires? You seem pretty attached to your money." "Ethan, it's not important, I'll stop." Cora had just come in from outside, and her hands were still cold. When she touched Ethan's forehead, it felt scorching hot. She hesitated for a moment, then said to the doctor, "I think he's at 40 degrees. "Miss Hayes, the thermometer is right there," the doctor said, exasperated. Ethan said seriously, "I think I'm at 40 degrees too." He used his free hand to grip Cora's. "So, please stay with me, okay?" The doctor quickly added, "Miss Hayes, please watch over him. I have other matters to attend to. Call me when the IV bag is empty." "I need to give him a raise," Ethan thought. Cora didn't dare to pull away. She glanced at her watch and after a few seconds of hesitation agreed. "All right, but not for too long." "Do you have plans?" Ethan asked instinctively. She had, in fact, just come from lunch with someone else. But looking at Ethan's fever-bright eyes and chapped lips, her heart softened for a second. Then, the system's warning echoed in her mind. Did you forget about the 10,000 steps? You had a fever for days after that. Did he care about you then? The system was so agitated it had dropped its usual formal tone. Cora sighed. I do. As expected, his eyes dimmed. His voice, already hoarse, was now barely a whisper. Is it Julian? The dessert in her stomach hadn't even fully digested. Cora nodded stiffly. Yes. I don't believe you. Who was this petulant child? It certainly wasn't Ethan Sterling. But Ethan was staring intently at her phone. Call him. Hoping Julian wouldn't expose her lie, Cora shakily dialed his number. She spoke first. Brother Julian. A sharp pain shot through her hand. Hearing the nickname, Ethan squeezed her hand so tightly that the IV line started to back up with blood. Are you still having dinner with me tonight? Cora pretended not to notice and continued. Of course, Cora, Julian laughed. So clingy, we just had lunch together. Cora didn't dare to look at Ethan's expression. After a few more words, she hung up. Ethan closed his eyes, a shimmer of moisture in them. So, you just came from lunch with him. I hope you two have a nice dinner. Chapter 24, perhaps because he was sick, Ethan was being unusually vulnerable. No matter what, he was still the man Cora had pursued for 5 years. Her heart softened, but she knew her primary mission was still to save her own life. To see this cold, heartless man finally moved by her in the past, that would have been the happiest moment of her life. But whether it was because of her mission or because of what he had said to the abbot after she had knelt up the entire mountain, Cora had no reason to waste any more time on him. The atmosphere in the room was tense. For a moment, the only sound was the soft whisper of their breathing. Seeing Ethan with his eyes closed, turned away from her, Cora said softly, "Get some rest." As she started to get up, her wrist was caught in a burning grip. There was a pleading look in Ethan's eyes. Don't go, he said. Cora didn't look back. Her voice trembled, but it was firm. Ethan, there's no chance for us anymore. I only came to see you today out of basic friendship. If you don't let go, we can't even be friends. Cora felt the grip on her wrist loosen. The tip of her nose tingled and her eyes burned. A wave of sadness washed over her. Even in the warmest room, she felt a bone-deep chill. There weren't always happy endings. The world was full of tragic couples, fated to never be together. Even if Ethan loved her now, what difference would it make? She wasn't the real Hayes heiress. No matter how long she played the part, she wasn't. She was bound by a difficult mission. From the moment she had approached Ethan with an ulterior motive, their love was built on a foundation of doubt. Cora left. She pulled her hand from Ethan's grasp and walked out the door without looking back. A gust of cold air rushed into the room, so cold it seemed to freeze the words in Ethan's throat. Ethan leaned back against the headboard, the lingering coolness of her touch on his palm. He looked up at the IV bag, at the slow, steady drip of the medicine, and gave a bitter smile. He had realized his mistake too late. The damage was done. What good was repentance now? From that day on, everyone noticed that the persistent heiress who had always been by Ethan's side was gone, and he hadn't become any more approachable. If the old Ethan was the pristine snow on a high mountain, the new Ethan was an ancient, unmelting glacier in the dead of winter. He was silent, cold. When he looked at someone, it was with the lifeless gaze of a stone. Elinor was also worried, but she knew that Cora had chased her son for 5 years with no result. She had no right to blame her for moving on. Abbot Mason looked at Ethan kneeling before the Buddha statue and sighed. Only here, surrounded by the scent of incense, would he let his hard exterior crack, revealing the confusion within. He copied the scriptures hundreds of times, like the most devout disciple, following the daily rituals from dawn till dusk. He asked the abbot, "Why is the banner outside the temple fluttering in the wind?" Abbot Mason pressed his palms together, his face filled with sorrow. "Patron, it is your heart that is not still." Serenity Peak Monastery was open to all who sought the path of enlightenment, but Ethan could not sever his worldly ties. Before he left the mountain, he returned the sandalwood beads to the abbot. "From today on," he said in a low voice, "I will not be coming back." "Amitabha," the abbot said, "may you find clarity and achieve your heart's desire." Chapter 25, regardless of her mission, spending time with Julian was enjoyable. Cora would occasionally ask the system to check his favorability, but she was surprised to find that despite their frequent interactions, his feelings for her remained lukewarm, hovering around 40%. She was puzzled. The system also seemed uncertain. Host, please do not rely too heavily on the favorability score. Try to use your own judgment. The final evaluation is not based on this number. So, Cora decided to stop forcing it. In her free time, she still heard news about Ethan. She knew he had stopped his spiritual retreats and was now completely focused on his career. Whether it was because of her or not, her heart felt heavy. People always talked about the sense of accomplishment one would feel by bringing that unattainable prize down from his divine pedestal. Cora had tried, and she had failed. But now he had come down on his own, willing to be tainted by the dust of the mortal world. Her father's gaze would sometimes be complicated when he looked at her. One day, Cora met his strange look and couldn't help but ask, "Dad, is something wrong? Why do you keep looking at me like that?" "Cora," her father said, a rare moment of quiet conversation between them, "you're with that Vance boy now, aren't you?" "We're not together yet," Cora said, confused. "Is there a problem with the business?" "No," her father said, taking a sip of tea. "The Sterling family has been doing business with us recently. Did you know?" She had recently started to get involved in some of the Hayes family's projects. Although her main mission was to win over Julian and save her life, as the sole heir, she also had to consider the family business. So, she knew about the project with the Sterlings. She hadn't been involved in the core aspects, but when she saw the contract signed by Ethan with its blatantly favorable terms, her jaw dropped. The Hayes family gets 60%, the Sterlings get 40%. And they're covering 90% of the costs and risks. "Dad, I know business is business, but this is so one-sided we could be arrested." Her father was used to her dramatic flair. "The Sterlings drafted the contract," he said, exasperated. "It's not that we're ruthless, it's that they're basically doing charity work. Can't you see who this is all for?" Cora hadn't realized he would go to such lengths. "Ethan Sterling, what are you thinking?" she wondered silently. "Is this compensation for the past 5 years, or are you trying to win me over?" If Ethan were in front of her, she would have asked him that question. Her father was, at the end of the day, a businessman. The next day, when Cora went to work, she found that her desk had been moved into a small office, where her CEO father was waiting for her. Chapter 26. Cora? "Mr. Hayes, you said that in the office there are no fathers and daughters, only superiors and subordinates," Cora interrupted him. "You want me to take over this project, don't you?" Her father rubbed his head, embarrassed. As it happened, Cora also wanted to confront Ethan about it, so she readily agreed. The project outline and materials were mostly approved anyway. Following up and communicating should be straightforward. When she first joined the company, she'd kept her identity a secret. Now that she'd been promoted, some people merely guessed Cora Hayes was a relative of one of the executives. No one suspected that the straightforward, hard-working girl was the legendary heiress. As she was packing up her things at her old desk, the male colleague who'd always seemed to have it in for her made a few passive-aggressive remarks. "It sure pays to be pretty. A hard-working guy like me would never get a promotion this fast." "Hard-working?" The intern, who was good friends with Cora, rolled her eyes. "Last time, Cora and I were the ones who had to change the water cooler jug. Give me a break." Seeing they were about to argue, Cora patted the intern's shoulder reassuringly. "It's fine. Come find me in my new office for lunch." Then she turned to the male colleague. "Feel free to try it yourself. A shame that with a face like yours, you'd probably have to pay them for the privilege." She had no time to waste on squabbles with people like him. The talk was easy, but as a newcomer to a project of this scale, doing her homework was the most important thing. The male colleague watched her leave, letting out a resentful scoff. He pulled out his phone and quickly typed a message to a number. "Hey man, you might want to check if you're being cheated on. She gets a promotion and a raise a month after starting. Who knows how she managed that?" The reply came quickly. "Thanks for the heads up. I know. If anyone at the company gets too close to her, please let me know." The man's fingers danced excitedly across the screen. "Of course, but this month's payment should go up a bit, right? She's not sitting next to me anymore, so it's not as easy to keep an eye on her during work hours." This time, the reply took a while. Afraid he'd lost his client, the man typed again. "Careful, or I'll tell your girlfriend you're having her watched." "How much?" The fish had taken the bait. The male colleague grinned from ear to ear. $2,000, my salary isn't low, but $2,000 is fair compensation for my wasted time. I'll send $1,600 now, the rest at the end of the month. From the day Cora had sat down beside him, the male colleague had been receiving calls from an anonymous number. The man claimed to be Cora's boyfriend, worried that she was so beautiful she'd find someone else at work, and hoped he could help keep an eye on her. At first, the colleague had refused, but as Cora's anonymous boyfriend gradually increased his offer, he'd agreed to earn the extra cash. It was just a matter of taking a few photos anyway. If he got caught, he could just say he thought she was pretty and wanted a keepsake. Chapter 27, humming a tune, the male colleague accepted the payment. The other man sent another message. Could you take a picture of Cora's work environment for me? I want to see her office and maybe get her a few things to make it more comfortable. Some people have all the luck, he thought. Such a thoughtful boyfriend. He glanced towards the office area. Cora was by the printer in the break room, and it looked like she wouldn't be back for a while. So he sauntered over, snapped a photo, and sent it to the man. Cora's printing some documents. The man replied with a polite thank you. Cora had no idea a spy had been placed right beside her. She just had a gut feeling that this colleague was obnoxious. Not being the gentle type, she had shut him down mercilessly a few times. Moving into a private office was much more comfortable. Cora made a mental note to request a printer for her office. After organizing the materials, she carefully shredded all the confidential parts. It was a little late to be learning all this now, but better late than never. For the entire afternoon, Cora couldn't lift her head from the massive stack of project plans. Her phone was on silent, and she missed several calls. Finally, a call came through that she answered. Looking out the window at the bright spring day, she heard a voice on the other end that was exceptionally gentle. Cora, have you been busy lately? Cora felt an inexplicable wave of disappointment. She didn't dare to examine its source and quickly composed herself. A little, but I can handle it. Starting from the bottom can be difficult, but once you can stand on your own 2 feet, our families can achieve a win-win partnership. In truth, because the Sterlings offered better terms, the Hayes family was already leaning towards partnering with them for most of their business. His words made Cora feel a bit awkward, and she mumbled a vague reply. I'm not at the bottom anymore. I'm away from that annoying colleague. I have my own office now. So, it's a promotion then? Are you free for dinner tomorrow night to celebrate? Cora was about to agree, wanting a break, but she couldn't be sure if a last-minute meeting would come up. She could only tell Julian she'd have to see. I'll wait for you. Julian's voice was laced with a smile that made her ears burn. See you tomorrow, Cora darling. Cora buried her face in her arms and lamented to the system. I have a feeling he's going to propose to me. The system was clearly stunned by her audacity. Host, please do not indulge in unrealistic fantasies. Based on the last reading between you and the target, you are not only far from marriage, but also a significant step away from a confession. I'm just thinking about it, Cora said. Besides, your so-called value readings are completely inaccurate. It's been months, so why is it still stuck at 40? Chapter 28, the system was also a bit puzzled. As a low-level AI, it couldn't report such minor issues to the main console and could only placate its host. The favorability program is a compensation system provided for the host. It cannot be considered the final result. It was always the same few lines. Cora didn't really understand the system's evaluation process. What would count as him having fallen in love with her? A proposal? Having a baby? Or would she have to wait until they were old and gray, holding hands in their final moments, praying to meet again in the next life? Her mind was filled with these strange thoughts, making it hard to concentrate. It wasn't until she arrived at work the next day that she saw her schedule, a lunch meeting with the Sterling Group's team. A business lunch was unavoidable. She couldn't decide if she wanted to see Ethan Sterling or not, but in the end, she took the initiative to attend. Among the crowd, his tall, imposing figure was nowhere to be seen. Cora breathed a sigh of relief, suppressing a faint pang of disappointment in her heart. In that moment of distraction, her glass was refilled by a stranger. Miss Hayes, a middle-aged man said, raising his glass with a wide smile. Care for a drink? Cora wanted to frown but decided to humor him. She didn't like to drink, but her tolerance was decent. But just as she brought the glass to her lips, a hand with well-defined knuckles, adorned with a beaded bracelet, gently stopped her. A man's voice, cool and crisp as jade, said, "Manager Wallace, I'll drink with you." Cora watched, wide-eyed, as Ethan Sterling took her glass. He paused for a moment, then pressed his lips to the very spot her lipstick had marked and drained the clear liquid in one go. The liquor was strong, but his face remained strikingly pale. His eyes, cold and sharp, fixed on Manager Wallace. Drink. How could he refuse an order from the CEO? Manager Wallace's face turned green. He wasn't young. Downing a glass like that would leave him bedridden for at least 2 days. He had no choice but to force it down. He thought he could use the dinner to harass a young woman, but who would have guessed he'd run into the CEO himself, a man who never bothered with such minor business dealings. Manager Wallace wiped the sweat from his brow and tried to find an excuse to slip away, but Ethan had no intention of letting him go. One glass after another, they went back and forth several times. Only when the man's greasy face finally turned the color of pig's liver did Ethan let out a cold laugh and tell him to get lost. Just as Ethan felt a wave of dizziness, a pair of soft hands steadied him. Cora asked, "Are you okay?" Most people turned red when they drank, but Ethan only grew paler, his lips losing their color. Penelope Quinn strode over, her voice tense. "Mr. Sterling, you were just diagnosed with..." Ethan cut her off, his voice low. "It's nothing." He nodded at Cora, signaling he was fine, then straightened up and took a step back, freeing himself from her support. But his gaze remained on Cora, deep and gentle, as if he couldn't get enough of looking at her. Penelope bit her lip. "Mr. Sterling, let me help you inside to rest. Did you drink a lot?" Chapter 29, "I'm fine," Ethan said, finally tearing his gaze away when Cora looked down, flustered. He loosened his tie to let out some heat. "Find the lead for this project. From now on, let's ditch this culture of closing deals over drinks." Cora was still lost in thought when her sharp eyes noticed a large red patch spreading across his exposed neck and collarbone. She immediately said, "Ethan, you're having an allergic reaction." It was the first time Ethan had ever drunk so much. He hadn't even known he was allergic to alcohol. Cora wanted to end the dinner and take him to the hospital, but Ethan insisted it was nothing serious and that he'd be fine after a little rest. "Then I'm calling an ambulance," Cora threatened, pulling out her phone. "Why won't you go get checked?" Ethan sighed in resignation. "This is your first time leading a project independently. If something goes wrong because of me, I couldn't live with myself." Cora froze. Ethan was actually being this considerate. In the past, that would have been unimaginable. After all, this was the man who had let her fall and be humiliated in public. In the end, Cora had her second-in-command take over the dinner while Penelope drove Ethan and her to the hospital. By now, the alcohol was starting to hit Ethan hard. Worried he might get sick in the car, Cora grabbed a plastic bag and let him lean his head on her shoulder. "You shouldn't drink so much if you can't handle it," she murmured softly, looking down at Ethan, who was flushed with drink, barely conscious and breathing heavily. Only now did Cora have a chance to really look at Ethan, whom she hadn't seen in a month. His hair had grown a little longer, falling softly over his forehead, yet he seemed even colder and more unapproachable than before. He had also lost a lot of weight. Penelope said, "Miss Hayes, are you and Mr. Vance together now?" "No," Cora said wearily. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" "Because Mr. Vance is incredibly public about his pursuit of you," Penelope said sharply. "Mr. Sterling has probably been thinking about it too." For once, Cora didn't immediately snap back. She thought for a moment but didn't answer. Since she started getting close to Julian, the only thing that attracted her was his handsome face. But Ethan. Years ago, she had thought that even if Ethan really became a monk, shaved his head, and received the ordination scars, she would still love him all the same. A soft sigh escaped her lips, but it reached the ears of the drunken Ethan. His long lashes fluttered and his voice was muffled. "Cora, don't sigh," Ethan whispered earnestly in her ear. "I can solve anything for you." Cora's heart melted completely. She touched his hot cheek. "All right, you drunkard, stop talking nonsense. If only you really could solve everything." The doctor examined Ethan, put him on an IV drip with 2 bags of fluid, and left. On the back of his hand, besides the fresh needle mark from today, there were several faint, bluish bruises from previous injections, made more prominent by his fair skin. What's wrong with him? Chapter 30. Penelope hesitated for a moment before telling Cora. Mr. Sterling had a lot of business dinners recently. Although he rarely drank, his schedule was chaotic and he often forgot to eat on time. It caused some stomach problems. Cora asked anxiously, "Is it serious?" "It shouldn't be anything major, but he really shouldn't have had anything to drink today. Miss Hayes, I hope you can talk some sense into him next time." Penelope still despised Cora, but she knew now that Cora was the only one who could get through to Ethan. The man on the bed stirred restlessly, his eyes suddenly flying open. With a sharp tug, he ripped the needle from his hand, sending a trail of blood droplets onto the floor. Ethan rushed into the bathroom, leaning over the sink and dry heaving. He hadn't eaten anything to cushion his stomach, so all he could bring up was a bit of alcohol. Penelope quickly went to get some warm water while Cora stood by his side, rubbing his back. Ethan's brow was furrowed in discomfort, and the spasms in his throat made his eyes red. When he finally calmed down, he leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. Penelope brought the warm water, and Cora said softly, "Drink a little." Perhaps throwing up had cleared his head. Ethan rinsed his mouth and splashed his face with water. His voice was still hoarse. "I'm fine now." Seeing the water dripping from his face, Cora said, "Don't drink any more in the future." Ethan paused, then gave a low hum of agreement. Penelope went to get the prescription from the doctor, leaving Ethan and Cora sitting side by side on the hospital bed. A long moment passed before someone broke the heavy silence. Cora tried to make her tone sound casual. "Why are you so thin? Did the Sterling's chefs quit?" Ethan's gaze rested on her profile, his expression full of cherish, but he only said faintly, "I've been busy lately." He'd been stubborn for a long time, so Cora didn't pay it much mind. She just rambled on, "Ethan, did you start smoking and drinking the moment you stopped your Buddhist practices? You're going to ruin your health like this. You have to take care of yourself. You used to be so good at it, weren't you?" In truth, he hadn't been good at it before either. Penelope could never persuade him. Most of the time, it had been Cora, relentlessly pestering him to take his medicine, eat with her, and go for regular checkups. Now that the spot beside him was suddenly empty, Ethan would occasionally find little notes in his car or coat pockets that Cora had tucked in there at some point. Her handwriting was neat, though her drawing skills were average. A round, crooked, smiley face would be doodled on the paper, yet it always managed to bring a rare smile to Ethan's face. "Eat well." He had collected them all, neatly arranged in a small suede pouch that he kept in his breast pocket. Only then, when he saw food, would he feel a flicker of appetite at least enough to keep him going. Chapter 30. After getting the medicine and paying the bill, Penelope returned to the room and said to Ethan, "Mr. Sterling, are we leaving now?" "No hurry," Ethan said, turning to Cora. "Did you get enough to eat earlier?" Cora hadn't eaten much either. She instinctively wanted to say she was full, but Ethan seemed to see right through her. A faint smile touched his lips. "My stomach is a bit upset from the alcohol. Could you eat a little something with me?" Cora dazedly agreed. They chose a Cantonese restaurant with a light menu. Ethan sent Penelope back to the company to retrieve a file and keep an eye on the people at the dinner party. As Cora watched the car drive away, she said with a laugh, "So how are we getting back later? Are we taking a cab? Can Mr. Sterling handle a ride in a Prius?" Ethan scooped a spoonful of congee, his expression unruffled. "If you can, I can." He wouldn't have minded walking back, actually. He would have liked to walk with Cora, to spend a little more time with her. Cora was only joking. Ethan was already humbling himself to eat with her at a street-side restaurant. She couldn't possibly make him ride in a budget car. She was worried the delicate CEO might shatter. After paying the bill, Cora was about to call her driver when Ethan pressed his hand over hers. "Didn't you mention a Prius?" He was actually willing. Cora was practically horrified, but Ethan was already fumbling with a ride-sharing app on his phone. Clearly, neither of them had used one in a while. Ethan had selected the most expensive tier of service, so it was definitely not going to be a Prius. When a Porsche slowly glided to a stop in front of them, Cora's jaw dropped. "You can get a Porsche with a ride-sharing app now." The window rolled down, revealing a handsome face. Julian Vance's lips curved into a smile. "Sir, ma'am, where to?" By the time the car Ethan had ordered arrived, the two had already been Julian's passengers for some time. "No wonder you weren't answering my messages," Julian said, gripping the steering wheel and glancing at Cora in the rearview mirror. You were with Mr. Sterling. It was just business, Ethan said coolly. Don't overthink it, Mr. Vance. Good, Julian said with a smile. After all, I wouldn't want such a formidable rival for your affection. Cora's heart began to pound. She excitedly asked the system that doesn't count as a confession, why isn't the mission complete? The system replied, host, have you forgotten? The requirement is love, not like. The target must at least say the word love. Cora keenly spotted a potential path to completion, so if he says he loves me, it'll work. Chapter 32, the system felt a vague sense of unease, but answered her question anyway. Yes, host. I have done my best to find the fastest way for you to complete the mission. With a clear goal in mind, a great weight lifted from Cora's shoulders. What if I don't love him back? The system, despite not having a head, felt a headache coming on. That is acceptable, host. You are not required to be with the target, but please hurry. There isn't much time left. Stop messing around. The tension in the car was so thick you could cut it with a knife, but Cora almost burst out laughing. She cleared her throat and said to Ethan, I'll have Julian take you home, okay? Ethan asked. What about you? Julian chuckled. Cora promised to have dinner with me tonight. Ethan's recently softened demeanor instantly froze over again. He was still sullen when he got out of the car. Cora waved a bright, cheerful goodbye, and Ethan thought bitterly, is she really that happy to be going out with Julian? Watching Ethan's heavy-shouldered silhouette, Cora sighed. Are you not happy with me, Cora? Julian said. Don't look at other men while you're in my car. I'll get jealous. Cora turned her head and smiled. Of course I'm happy. So, brother Julian, where are we eating tonight? Did you know I can cook, Cora? Why don't you try my cooking tonight? Cora said to the system, I really think he's going to confess to me. After all, CEOs like to do things differently. A normal person might plan a grand proposal, but a CEO would prefer the simple, quiet moments. The scariest part was that the system agreed with her, even as it stared at the less than average favorability score. Host, please keep up the good work. Could this thing really be broken? A short while later, the car turned onto a rather secluded path. Watching the increasingly unfamiliar scenery outside, Cora asked, Brother Julian, isn't it hard to get back to the city from a villa out here? Julian replied, Yes, so I only stay here occasionally. Her phone let out a low battery warning. Cora saw 2 missed calls, but decided to wait until they arrived and borrowed Julian's charger to call back. The drive took almost an hour. The sky in early spring darkened early. The moment Cora stepped out of the car, a gust of wind made her shiver. Let's go, Julian said. I've already bought the groceries. It was truly remote. Cora had felt a flicker of nervousness, but she reasoned that if Julian wanted to do something to her, he'd had plenty of opportunities before. Besides, the bag of fresh vegetables looked perfectly normal. She dismissed her suspicions and followed Julian through the main gate. The villa door clicked shut and locked behind them. This was the first time Cora had been to Julian's private residence. Thinking back, they had almost always chosen to eat out. Julian went into the kitchen. Wait here for a bit, you can look around. Chapter 33, after confirming multiple times that he didn't need her help, Cora left the kitchen. She was clueless about cooking and worried she'd only be in the way. The villa was large. The first and second floors showed some signs of life, but the third and fourth floors looked as if they had never been touched. Cora went up the spiral staircase to the second floor. When she turned on the lights, she saw a grand piano in the living room, covered in a thin layer of dust. She asked hesitantly, would Julian's character profile include playing the piano? I remember this model being quite expensive. The system seemed to be searching its database. There is no record of him playing, but it's not unusual for someone to have one as a decorative piece. Cora walked down the long hallway toward the guest rooms. Perhaps sensing she was no longer on the first floor, Julian called out from the kitchen, Don't go into the rooms, they haven't been cleaned in a long time. They're dusty, the third floor is locked. I'll show you later. I have a bad feeling about this, Cora said. System, are you sure Julian is okay? Her phone finally died with a soft chime. At the end of the empty hallway was a door. Unlike the others, its handle was clean, as if it were used often. Even though she had just heard Julian's warning, Cora couldn't resist reaching for it. She pushed the door open. The light flicked on with a click, revealing a room full of art. Canvases and sketch pads were piled everywhere in a state of disarray. The largest painting was of a man's profile. He was positioned in front of a white backdrop, looking gentle and handsome, his almond-shaped eyes seeming to gaze out from the canvas at the world. Was it a self-portrait of Julian? For a moment, Cora was startled, but then she relaxed. She wasn't an art connoisseur, but she could tell the painting was filled with a great deal of emotion. The system had been silent ever since they entered the villa, and for some reason, Cora had felt a persistent sense of unease. She took a step back to leave, but bumped into a warm embrace. Julian still had a spatula in his hand, and a thin sheen of sweat covered his forehead, making him look even more charming and gentle. "What are you doing here?" Cora laughed. "Just exploring. Are you done cooking?" "Not yet," Julian said, taking her wrist with his clean hand. "It's really dirty in here. Go wait for me outside, Cora." "But these paintings are beautiful," Cora said, trying to pull her wrist away, but his grip was tight. "Did you paint them?" A hint of nostalgia flickered in Julian's eyes. "Yes, I went through a painting phase a while ago. Do you find the subject matter too indecent?" "They're just nude models," Cora said. "I'm not that old-fashioned." Julian nodded. "As long as you don't mind, I rarely paint anymore and I don't come into this room much." He was lying. Chapter 34. Cora continued, "Is that piano yours?" This time, Julian hesitated for a long time. His eyes were dark as he looked at Cora and smiled. "Yes." Cora nodded, gesturing for him to lead the way out. "It's stuffy in here. Let's go, shall we?" The grip on her wrist loosened slightly. Cora took 2 steps and then suddenly wrenched her arm free. She quickly moved to the enormous portrait, grabbed the white cloth behind it, and yanked it down with all her might. Just as she suspected, there was a large space behind it. Cora stared at the walls covered in photographs and the haphazardly placed plaster casts, her limbs going numb. She could barely breathe. She turned to look at Julian, who was watching her calmly with his arms crossed, her pupils constricted. "What is this?" The system in her head began to blare a sharp alarm, its usual calm, official tone gone. Host, get out of here. The favorability program wasn't wrong. But headquarters just sent a new scoring rubric. A score of 35 is required to be considered a friend. 40 is, at best, a friendly acquaintance. His accurately measured favorability toward you is only 30. Who would show such affection for someone they considered less than a friend? Cora's head swam, and she swayed on her feet. As Julian strode toward her, she stumbled backward into the hidden area filled with casts and photos. There were so many people. All of them were beautiful young women, naked and with their eyes closed, lying on beds while the photographer arranged them in various poses. Looking closely, she realized the plaster casts were molds of human bodies. How could Cora not understand what she was seeing? All these years, his Playboy reputation had been a cover for his abuse of women. He even used photos and money to blackmail and control them. With this 2-pronged approach targeting girls from ordinary families, it was no wonder no one had ever come forward to say a bad word about him. Julian closed in on her. And this time, there was no escape. A playful expression appeared on his usually gentle face. "Cora, why are you so naughty? Are you scared?" He pinched her chin, forcing her to look up at him. She sneered, "You sick psycho. You're finished. Do you think my parents don't exist? Do you think I'm one of those poor little girls you've played with?" "Oh," Julian raised an eyebrow. "Cora, that's the expression I like most on you." "It's so much more interesting to play with a girl from a wealthy family," he laughed. "The others are useless. A small threat and they start crying, a few words and they're pathetically weak." He liked the stubborn ones the best. Chapter 35. Cora almost wanted to spit in his face, but knew that provoking him would be a mistake. She calmed herself for a moment. "Are you not afraid of my parents' retaliation? No matter what, the Hayes family is more than capable of taking the Vance family down with us." Julian narrowed his eyes. "Is that so? Then what about this project?" He rolled a piece of paper into a tube and tapped it gently against Cora's cheek. "Miss Hayes, if you leak confidential information on your very first deal, do you think the Sterlings and the Hayes will believe you're anything but a fool trying to curry favor with me? And after I'm done with you, I'll take some photos and plaster them all over the headlines. I imagine even the best PR team the Hayes family can hire won't be able to scrub that clean." Cora recognized the document. It was the project proposal she had printed that day. Her pupils shrank. "How do you have this?" She had shredded every copy. Julian shrugged. It's not just this. If your photos can be sold, why can't company secrets? He can't be traced, and he doesn't get a cut of the project anyway. $50,000. A worthy price for Miss Hayes. His tone was filled with contempt. Cora was silent for a long time, then said to the system, "He's brilliant. No wonder so many people have been hurt by him, and no one ever reported it." System. "Have you figured out how to escape?" Cora said. "Do I still need to complete the mission?" She wasn't worried about being violated by Julian. The one who deserved to die was someone else entirely. But failing the mission meant certain death. The system said, "Host, this was indeed a failure of the main program. I will report this immediately and fight for fair compensation for you." There had never been a target like this before. Completing the mission and hearing him say, "I love you," was now practically impossible. She only had 3 days left. This was an even more pressing problem than facing a psycho. Her family would eventually come looking for her. Julian wouldn't do anything to threaten her life. For now, all she could do was stall. Although her phone was dead, Julian cautiously took it from her. "Cora, you really are different," Julian said. "Not a single trace of fear. Shall we go down for some dinner?" Cora had no idea how he could act so nonchalant and could only attribute it to his thick skin. But she knew she needed to eat to have the strength for whatever might happen next. It wasn't worth getting angry with someone like him and harming her own body. She might as well see what he was planning. Before leaving, she looked at the enormous portrait again. The brushwork felt strangely familiar. Cora asked him, "Is that a self-portrait? You're so narcissistic." Julian said casually, "Someone else painted it." "Isn't it nice? It's all right, I guess." "Looks human enough," she retorted sharply. "You can't really tell he's a monster." Julian didn't seem the least bit angry. He smiled as he brought out the dishes and set them in front of her. He had managed to make a few simple dishes look quite presentable. They looked and smelled delicious. But just looking at his face reminded Cora of the girls in the darkroom, photographed without their knowledge. Suddenly, she lost her appetite. Chapter 36. Julian raised an eyebrow. "Afraid I've poisoned it." "You're disgusting to look at," Cora said with a sweet smile. He didn't get angry at all. Instead, he burst out laughing. Cora thought he was a complete lunatic. "Cora, you're so much like her," Julian said after his laughter subsided, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. He picked up his chopsticks and ate a mouthful of food. "Go on, eat, it's not bad." Cora didn't know who her was, and she knew Julian wouldn't satisfy her curiosity. She forced herself to take a bite. "This is what you call not bad." She immediately spat the greens out. "Is there something wrong with your sense of taste?" "It's still not good," Julian actually nodded. "That's right, I can't taste anything." Cora's eyes widened in surprise. Someone with no sense of taste would surely look pained while eating, but she had dined with Julian so many times and had never noticed. "Why?" "Because the person who taught me how to cook is dead," he said flatly. "So I lost my sense of taste too." Cora knew a little about Julian's family. His parents were both alive and well. It must have been the her he was talking about. The dusty piano, the familiar painting, and all the art hidden in that room. In a flash of insight, she shot to her feet. A name surfaced in her mind. Estelle Morrow. She was the youngest and most brilliant member of the Artists' Association, talented, gifted, and considered a rising star by all who knew her. Perhaps heaven was jealous of her talent, because 5 years ago, Estelle Morrow had passed away from an illness. The reason the painting looked familiar was that Cora had visited her posthumous exhibition. She had even invited Ethan to go with her at the time. Julian watched her thoughtful expression, then leaned in close, his fingers gently stroking her cheek. "You're so alike," he said, his voice full of obsession. "From the moment I saw you, I wondered if Estelle thought I was suffering too much and had come back to see me. I know it's just a foolish hope. She's long dead. She died buried under an avalanche of slander, died on the filthy concrete. But even your personalities are similar. How could I possibly let you go?" Estelle Morrow came from a modest background, but her artistic talent was so immense that she refused to give up painting and music. After a confrontation with her parents, she came to the big city alone to work and save money for art school. Despite her own struggles, she had unhesitatingly taken in Julian, whom she found huddled under a bridge. At the time, Julian wasn't the CEO of Vance Corporation. He was just a high school student who had run away after a fight with his parents. Estelle, who was a year and a half older, took good care of him. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say they depended on each other during that time. In their day-to-day life together, Julian truly felt the love he had never received before. Chapter 37. Estelle had a younger sister of her own, so she naturally saw Julian as a little brother. She came from a very small town and had no idea that the plain-looking jacket Julian wore could cover her tuition and living expenses for 4 years. They lived like that for 2 years. Estelle was accepted into a prestigious university, and though young and inexperienced, she began to make a name for herself, becoming a prodigy with a bright future. 5 years had passed, but Julian still remembered that late night when Alexis pulled into their secluded, grimy alley. It wasn't even his parents who had come. It was him who had suggested his parents install a surveillance camera in their younger son's room. It was him who had told Julian he had no place in the family. Behind dark blue lenses, a pair of cold eyes stared at the young woman who opened the door. The butler said politely, "Miss Morrow, hello, I'm here to pick up the young master." It was New Year's Day. Estelle was not one to be easily bullied. She stood in the doorway with her hands on her hips, a one-woman army ready for battle, and demanded, "Hey, who are you people?" "I am the Vance family's private butler," the man said slowly. "Please do not obstruct me. This is his father's wish." Julian had always told Estelle he ran away because he wasn't favored at home, that his parents only loved his older brother and never spared him a glance. He never mentioned his family's status. Estelle, looking at his young, bruised face, had instinctively assumed he was a poor kid just like her. Even with her limited knowledge of wealth, she knew that an ordinary family wouldn't have a butler. The luxury car was an unabashed display of riches. Behind her was a dilapidated wooden door. They couldn't even afford to pay the heating bill, huddling together for warmth like two fluffy little animals. In that instant, the fearless Estelle couldn't help but shrink back. Julian, who had been waiting for her to come back for their hot pot dinner, finally grew impatient and ran out. Peeking over Estelle's shoulder, he saw the person he despised most in the world. He instinctively took a step back and shouted. Close the door. Estelle glanced at the calm, adult face of the man. But, close the door, Julian shook his head, grabbing her arm and pleading. Estelle, sister, please, close the door, I'm begging you. Even after learning his identity, Estelle never blamed the boy. She didn't feel it was tragic to have spent her money raising a rich young master. On the contrary, seeing the palpable terror on the boy's face, the slender girl stood before the man and said firmly, "He doesn't want to go back with you. Please don't force him." Chapter 38. The man made no move to use force. He simply bowed slightly. "I will be back." The wooden door slammed shut. Julian hugged Estelle and sobbed his heart out. Afterward, Julian explained his family situation and why he had run away. Estelle just scolded him a couple of times, calling him a brat, before comforting him. "If you don't want to go back, you can stay here for a while longer. But you really should go back to school. You can't put it off any longer," she added. She went out in the dead of winter to work as a teaching assistant, trying to save up for Julian's tuition. At first, her status as a student from a top university and her impressive resume won her the trust of many. But the second time she went, every art studio closed its doors to her. Seducing an underage boy, have you no shame? You sure know how to get them, while they're young, such a schemer just trying to marry into a rich family, aren't you? Newspapers, media outlets, a flood of scandals, accused a rising artist from a certain university of living with the underage son of a prominent family for 2 years. The articles explicitly stated her name and identity, even detailing her artworks and the awards she had won over the years. Art has a high barrier to entry. Outsiders pointed fingers, claiming her work was undeserving and that the young master had bribed the organizers for her. Insiders remained silent. No one would stick their neck out for her at a time like this. Overnight, she went from a well-regarded budding creator to a social pariah, a gold-digging seductress who preyed on a minor. Estelle's phone vibrated. It was a call from Julian. He sounded anxious and frustrated. "Estelle, don't pay any attention to those papers. My parents are just trying to force me to come home. As soon as I go back, they'll take down all those articles. Just don't look at them, okay?" Her sister sent a worried message. Her mentor coldly informed her that she had been expelled. She managed a weak smile and said, Okay, don't worry, be safe on your way back. I thought she would wait for me, Julian said with a bitter smile. But when I got back, I heard she had killed herself. Estelle had a premonition that once Julian left this time, they would never see each other again. In the small apartment they shared, she finished her last painting. A new year had begun, a time for new beginnings. All that was left for Julian was a warm, gentle portrait and a cold body. But she wouldn't want you to become like this, Cora said after a long silence. What's the difference between you now and your parents who used their power to crush you? Julian replied. I wish she would climb out of her grave and curse me. Cora had no obligation to pull someone out of the darkness. After saying her piece, she fell silent. The story was heavy enough to make the air still. Cora touched her face and said to the system in her mind, Did you hear that? I heard. I will do my best to request compensation for the host. Cora felt she had been incredibly naive. How could she have ever thought that pursuing Julian would be easier than pursuing Ethan? The system had given her one impossible task after another. What good is compensation if I'm not alive? If I'm dead, what's the point? Chapter 39, the system was speechless. For a moment, Cora couldn't think of a good solution either. She was starting to feel a little dizzy, though it wasn't very noticeable. Across from her, Julian smiled faintly. Cora, you're very careless. You drugged me, but Julian had eaten the same food Julian sighed. Did you ever consider that I put it on the utensils, not in the food? Cora's limbs felt weak. In her mind, the system was shouting frantically. Host, don't fall asleep. You don't have much time left if you fall asleep. You might never. Cora's eyes fluttered shut, and she passed out. Julian looked at the girl slumped over the table, his eyes filled with a deep obsession. Estelle, after all these years, he pressed the back of his hand to Cora's cheek and sighed softly. I've finally found the one who is most like you. 5 years had been enough time for him to realize, through the heart-wrenching pain, that his feelings for Estelle had long surpassed simple admiration. In the springtime of his life, he had fallen in love with someone who could never return to him. So he spent the rest of his life searching for a replacement. Looking at those pure faces, each bearing some resemblance to Estelle, an uncontrollable resentment grew in his heart. Why weren't you willing to wait for me? Why did you leave me to live in this world alone? Why? Julian buried his face in the small of Cora's back, feeling a long-lost warmth. For a moment, he could almost believe it was Estelle with him. Tears soon soaked the back of Cora's dress. It was just like that freezing night. He had looked out at the city, at the warm red lanterns hanging everywhere as families bid farewell to the old year and welcomed the new. Sharp pains shot through his body from a broken rib he'd sustained while forcing his way out of the house. He stood barefoot in the snow, panting, staring wide-eyed at the old woman who had occasionally looked out for them. They took her away a couple of days ago, the old woman said, shaking her head. Looked like she was gone, so much blood, poor child. His whole body shivered with cold. Julian heard his teeth chattering. He stumbled through the door and saw his own face on the large canvas. To the best kid, Julian. He closed his eyes, knelt on the floor, and cried uncontrollably. Host, wake up, you really don't have much time left. Cora was jolted awake by the voice in her head. Her head was splitting, and she felt a vibration beneath her. She was in a car, and in front of her was a grim-faced Julian. Where are you taking me? Shut up, Julian snapped, his composed demeanor gone. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror. Damn it, how did they find us so fast? Cora instinctively thought her family had discovered her disappearance, but in just 2 short days, her parents wouldn't have suspected an accident. The only person who could have realized something was wrong was Ethan Sterling. She strained to look behind them. Sure enough, it was the familiar Bentley. At the wheel was Ethan, his face a mask of stone. Cora had been in his car before. She knew that the normal Ethan would never drive this fast. The scenery flew past the window. They were already on a bridge, traffic blurring beside them. Cora said softly, Julian, you're speeding. You'll get arrested. A vein throbbed on Julian's forehead. He gritted his teeth. It's all because of that lover of yours. He's sticking to us like glue. Just wait until I sew your mouth shut. Then you won't be able to talk so much. Chapter 40. Watching Ethan's car get faster and faster. A chill went through Cora. She asked the system, how much longer do I have? How many days was I asleep? The system replied, Host, you might as well try asking Julian to say he loves you directly. How many hours? Host, There are only 30 minutes left until the mission deadline. Please complete the mission immediately, or you will be erased. Cora laughed coldly. Having someone like him say he loves me would be disgusting anyway. What did Estelle ever do wrong? She worked so hard to support him for years, only to be driven to her death by his family, and he still hurts so many people in the name of remembering her. Since I'm going to die anyway, I might as well do some good. The system said frantically, "Host, what are you doing? There are still 30 minutes left. There's still a chance I'm already appealing to the higher-ups. Don't be impulsive, system. You're actually kind of cute. Why were you so cold before?" It was momentarily speechless, able to do nothing but frantically send error signals to the main program. Cora straightened up as much as she could and said to Julian, "Hey, did you really love Estelle Morrow?" Julian sneered, "Don't try any tricks. Hey, Cora, what are you doing?" From behind, Cora wrapped her bound hands around his neck and squeezed with all her might. His hands slipped, and the steering wheel jerked violently. The car smashed through the guardrail and plunged toward the river below. "Go apologize to her in hell," Cora roared. "You scumbag!" Ethan watched the car in front of him lose control, and his heart stopped. Without a moment's hesitation, he slammed on the brakes and yelled to Penelope in the passenger seat. "Call the police, then." He vaulted over the railing and dove into the river. The current was strong and icy cold. The river had only recently thawed from the winter freeze. Cora's head slammed against the car's roof, and she felt a wave of dizziness. In the front seat, Julian was already unconscious. She stared in disbelief at Ethan outside the car window. "What are you doing down here?" Cora had jumped because she knew she was going to die soon anyway. Ethan wasn't a professional driver. A chase like this would have ended in an accident sooner or later. She wasn't too cold inside the car yet, but Ethan, fully submerged in the river, already had blue lips. His hand was clamped tightly on the door handle as he yelled frantically. "Push the door. Before the car fills with water." Cora knew that if she didn't get out, Ethan might not be willing to leave. She pushed against the door with all her strength, but the water pressure was too great. Cora looked at Ethan through the window, her eyes turning red. "Just go, it won't open." "I'm not leaving," Ethan said, shaking his head, his face pale. "Cora, push harder, don't give up." "I'm not mad at you anymore, Ethan," Cora sobbed as water began to seep in through the door seals, filling the car. "Swim back, I'm not going to make it. It's no use even if I get out. You have to live, Ethan." Ethan ignored her, his grip unwavering. The next second, he gritted his teeth and started smashing the window with his elbow. The safety hammer. Cora's eyes lit up. Ethan seemed to realize it too and pulled every sharp object he had from his pockets, striking the window. Once, twice, 3 times, the window cracked. Ethan smashed his fist through the glass and pulled Cora out. The water was freezing. He used every last bit of his strength to kiss her lips. "You promised you weren't mad at me anymore, Cora." Cora's face was a mess of tears and river water. She choked out, I'm not mad. Are we going to die here together today?" The next second, the system shouted in her mind with joy. "Cora, quick, get Ethan to say he loves you. The error report was successful. Your mission target has been changed to Ethan Sterling." Cora's eyes lit up. Forgetting everything else, she cupped Ethan's face and whimpered, "Ethan, I love you. Do you love me?" Ethan's lips and cheeks were turning a dark purple from the cold. He smiled, his voice so weak it was almost inaudible. "Cora, I love you. I love you." System, mission complete. "Congratulations," host Cora let out a breath of relief. The next moment, the rushing water submerged them. On the shore, she could hear the faint sounds of police officers jumping in. She used the last of her strength to hold on to the unconscious Ethan and screamed. "We're here." They were saved. Cora kissed Ethan's lips, her vision blurry with tears. The sword of Damocles that had hung over her head was finally gone. She and her Ethan would never be separated again.